What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had to choose between his sister and his soulmate? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creation of this beautiful creation. Naruto, 5 years had passed since he was a naive 12 years old boy, since he was just a kid. Wish he had that these times would never go away, would never fade. But time had other plans. So much had happened. Uzumaki Naruto, a legend that many would remember for a long time in the future. He grew up being hated by everyone in his village, in the very grounds that he called home. Being only human, he hated them back for it but didn't retaliate, didn't seek revenge. No, this boy was special, for he knew other ways of avenging, other ways of opening one's eyes. After so many years of scorn, hate, he kept striving on to prove to the people of Konoha what he truly was, to show them a human being worthy of attention. And all this pain, all this misery, all of it for just one thing, and that thing was the bane of his life till now, it was the destruction of his happiness. Kyuubi no Yoko, the Lord of Demons, the mightiest being known in existence. A single swing of his kilometer-long tails could undo cities and mountains alike, make tsunamis rise from the seas and devour all. The mightiest demon, in the body of a child. It was a burden, his burden, and all this time he had to endure alone. He had to move forward alone. He had to take each step on his very own. But aside being a Jinchuriki, he was also human. And humans all have a weak point, don't they? His was his emotions, the lack of human contact not allowing him to grasp the meaning of feelings as those of love, be it romantic, parental or brotherly. Loneliness, it was his greatest enemy, the black mist of his life that he fought to erase, the flame that consumed his heart yet he strived to extinguish. Such was he, Uzumaki Naruto, a lonely human that sought acceptance for being different, a little boy that needed the love he was deprived, and a now grown man that wanted to prove his worth. But, since his adventures began, so did change come in his life. His first real friends were Haruno Sakura, classmate of his till their graduation, afterwards his teammate. The girl he sought after all this time, the girl he wanted to take away from the Uchiha that didn't even acknowledge her existence lest he was forced to. Was it really love that he felt towards her? Was this the real thing? And if it was, how could he really know? The Uchiha Sasuke. He was and is his greatest rival as a ninja, his best friend in life and death, his brother in all but blood. And so as life went on they communicated in their own way. In between their spars and rude words, their curses and injuries, their missions and contradictions, they trusted each other. Yet fate is a cruel mistress. Sasuke was an avenger. His very heart could sink to the darkness, if it was for him to gain power, to become strong, in order to defeat the one he despised. The one he hated, the murderer of his family, the bane of his existence. Uchiha Itachi, his once older brother. For this very reason, he left his village, his home, his life, to finish his quest for revenge. And the snake Sannin, the slithery man known as Orochimaru, was more than happy to give it. But the cost would be great. Naruto wouldn't let this slide, wouldn't let his best friend, his brother slip away in the darkness, slip away in the cold again. So he journeyed on, to find him. At the first attempt he failed by an inch. Sasuke slipping from his grasp if only because of his own foolishness, or maybe the light of his heart. After 3 years, after his training alongside the frog Sannin, alongside Jiraiya, he ventured once more in the darkness to retrieve him. And he succeeded, for his brother was finally free from the madness of the cursed seal, was free from the binds of Orochimaru. And so he returned, back to Konoha, back home. Even so, the Uzumaki had yet once more to deal with another problem that arose, or was always there. He had left out of account that, bringing Sasuke back would most likely ruin his own life in a way, for Sakura once more had eyes only for him. Had eyes only to help him recover and reacquaint him with the life he once had. Her affections didn't go unnoticed by the blonde, but neither did the fact that she cared about him too, if not as much. At the very least, she finally no longer punched him on sight. But the problem magnet his whole life seemed to be wouldn't relent so soon. Now the hunters came into view, the hunters of what lied within him, the ones that sought to destroy his very soul in order to take what lied behind. A criminal organization known across the elemental nations for the various nuke nins that occupied it. The ones that called themselves Dawn, Akatsuki, They have been hunting him for years and now was at long last their final strike. A battle raged on at the Valley of the End, where once two brothers in all but blood fought against each other, now combined their powers to bring down the common enemy. Swords clashed, techniques light up the sky, explosions and scorched earth accompanying it all. The battlefield clearly showed the marks the combatants left behind, marks of devastation. But none was about to relent, none was about to give in. Naruto, having trained under the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya the Frog Summoner, was a force to be reckoned with as he battled to overpower Kisame. Both shinobi had chakra reserves beyond humanly possible, both had stamina far from normal. And both wanted each other's blood. Sasuke, the younger of the last Uchihas that had trained under the other Sannin, Orochimaru, had somehow managed to take the best out of the man, and these best things were quite few, considering the man's reputation and character. Speed, strength, cunningness, elusiveness. These four attributes alone were enough to keep the young Uchiha alive as he clashed his blade against his brother's, the noise of metal against metal echoing for a split second before the blades clashed again and again in a wild dance that one wrong step could mean their death. Falter they did not, Sharingan ablaze and eyes locked as their smooth and experienced motions kept them alive, for now. The blades clashed one more time, the sound echoing once more. The Sharingans locked to each other as nearly identical frowns faced one another. "Give up, Sasuke. We both know who will win in the end," he whispered, his whole strength focused on keeping his brother at bay. Sasuke's frown seemingly deepened. "You're right, we know," smirking, he stepped aside, letting his brother's blade fall for a second at the sudden movement and release of resistance. Sasuke spooned on one feet, his blade prepared to cut off the older Uchiha's neck at the end of the motion. Though said brother didn't falter for more than a split second, regaining his stance and quickly dodging the lethal strike with a duck. He smirked as he did a spoon of his own while ducked, using one leg to kick the younger one off his feet. Sasuke hit the ground, hard. The lethal blade of the former Leaf Ninja found its tip right at the young Avenger's neck, an emotionless Itachi over him. Any frown or smirk he held before now vanished. "It is over, Sasuke." The blade went down. And all the fallen ninja did was poof in a cloud of smoke, a tree chunk in his place. Itachi's eyes didn't have time to even open in surprise as he felt a blade going through his heart. "You're right. It surely is, Itachi," the older one could only smirk. How could he miss this? Most certainly, he did not. For his body dissipated in a cloud of crows, leaving the young Uchiha with wide Sharingan eyes and a mind in wonder as his brother's quiet laughter echoed, the world gone dark for a second before he returned to reality, the sight of his best friend meeting his gaze, he fighting against one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Kisame proved quite the challenge. Naruto had already launched a Rasengan at the swordsman who absorbed it with his Samahata, the legendary sword that devoured chakra, making the mighty technique dissipate as if it was nothing. Naruto knew he had to act fast. His hands came to a familiar seal as shadow clones made their entrance into existence with several puffs of smoke. They all charged the Sharkman head-on, the smoke of their birth giving them a slight advantage in the element of surprise. Kisame faltered for a moment after hesitantly killing one of the clones that came out of nowhere. This moment was all the clones needed. Naruto's patented move, the Uzumaki barrage, could be seen happening right before one's eyes as Kisame's body was kicked and punched to oblivion. After many moments that seemed to touch eternity, the body hit the ground and turned into nothing but a liquid substance, what people came to refer to as water. A few feet further, the swordsman rose from a pile of said liquid, a wide grin on his fish-like features. "So, is that all you got?" he said as he took down each and every clone with ease. Naruto only frowned. Without a word, he unsheathed the whirlwind shuriken, opening it and throwing it at his opponent. Kisame's smirk could be seen widening as the weapon was even larger than the normal shuriken of this type, making it slower and easier to avoid. He just caught the weapon in one hand, a slight trail of blood falling for the cut skin. He threw the weapon behind him as if it was nothing, bringing his hand before his face, licking the blood as if he enjoyed it. Naruto charged forward, kunai drawn in one hand as he prepared to clash with Samahata. Kisame's smirk seemed face-breaking as he brought his mighty blade down with a swing, cutting Naruto in half. Only for him to dissipate into smoke, the Fuma shuriken from a mere minute ago lying before him. The former ninja of the mist knew better though than to allow himself to be caught in such a simple trap. Turning around, he blocked an incoming hail of shuriken and kunai with his blade, the weaponry hitting the ground. And as if on cue, a company of 7 more ninjas arrived in the scene, all in black cloaks with red clouds. More members of the Dawn. They stood still and waited upon Uchiha Madara's head, seemingly just sitting back and enjoying the battle before them. Naruto frowned as fear gripped his heart. He and Sasuke were clearly outnumbered. He turned around to see the swordsman holding Samahata high, preparing to strike the teen town and probably cut him in half. His wicked smirk was all across his face, as the blade descended upon the blonde. Naruto was frozen for a second before registering what was going to happen in his troubled mind. In the last split second, he jumped out of the way from the fatal attack. He charged another Rasengan and in anger flew towards Kisame, his rage building on as survival instincts kicked in, the fact that they were outnumbered making him take even more haste in his actions. Kisame only smirked and raised his sword to block the chakra ball as he had done before. But the attack never came. He lowered his blade a few inches to see that the boy was still there, Rasengan in hand and smirking at him. He questioned. Suddenly, he felt his whole back burning and be ripped apart. He felt his skin being violently destroyed. The last thing he saw before oblivion took his soul was the chakra sphere before him dissipate, the blonde holding it poofing in smoke. That was easy. Naruto exclaimed with a wide grin from behind the swordsman's now corpse, the chakra ball fading from his hand. He turned around to face the rest of the organization, knowing that this was probably his last fight. From the corner of his eye he saw Sasuke approaching him, his facial features graced by a seemingly never-fading smirk as they stood upon the first Hokage's head, gazing down upon their opponents. Naruto grinned back at him as he prepared yet another Rasengan. The black-haired teen nodded as electricity coursed through him and to his blade, making it light up as if thunder itself had took hold of it. And out of nowhere, a glimpse of hope rose in the heart of the 2 Konoha combatants as blurred figures run towards them. Sasuke's Sharingan able to recognize their fast-moving figures. The Uchiha's quiet mumbling was cut off as an even wider smirk found its way on his face. Turning around he faced the Dawn once more, with 5 more to aid him. Lee, the green beast of Konoha was striking his nice guy pose, toothy smile and thumbs up accompanying. Sakura cracked her knuckles, her smirk one that would make any Uchiha proud. Choji was for once not munching on something, hands itching to prepare his family jutsu and crush something. Kiba stood beside the Akamichi on his white-brown dog, a feral grin on his face as he whispered to the large canine's ear, which replied with quiet woofs. And last but no least, was Hinata, the lavender-eyed girl prepared in her Juken stance, Byakugan glaring daggers at their opponents. Both blonde and dark-haired brothers looked at each other and back at their friends, a smirk and a grin on each respective face. Without further ado, Naruto exclaimed the only word that was needed at the moment. Akuzo. And it was on. XXXXX. Sasuke took on a man that looked more like a plant, his face painted black in the one side and white in the other. He had something like a giant plant mouth around his head. Sasuke's smirk was never fading. He began the seals for a special fire jutsu that could burn this plant boy to ashes if it hit, leaving his friends and himself with one less thing to worry about. Naruto engaged combat against Kakuzu, a man with most of his face and hair hidden by a mask, green eyes meeting cerulean. The blonde didn't know if he had to be disgusted or filled with horror, that the man seemed to have tendrils that poured out of his body under his control. Sakura and Lee found it hard to combat against Hidan and his techniques, his powers over immortality and specialization in close combat efficient against the Konoha shinobi, whose whole power lied in melee and their strikes couldn't possibly destroy him. Kiba, Choji and Hinata all fought against pain, or his 6 bodies whatsoever. Choji's oversized abilities seemed efficient at some point since his massive strikes needed a good deal of speed to avoid. Plus that whenever each of them tried to escape Choji's crushing attacks, Kiba and Hinata waited for them. An hour, a decade, an eternity, none of them knew how much time had passed as the sun was beginning to rest into the forest, the light of the sunset washing the battlefield. The Uchiha had managed to set his opponent ablaze quickly enough. When he was done with the seals, he had charged Sekko head-on, the plant man only smirking as he vanished in the ground. It didn't take much for Sasuke's quick mind to know what was coming next. In a matter of a second, he turned around, his grand fireball technique shot straight on Sashu's face, incarnating him to dust. Sakura's mighty punches had managed to literally make a hole in the concrete ground. Lee's blinding speed without his weights was enough to outmaneuver Hidan's slow yet lethal attacks. And so on, they had managed to throw the immortal into the pit. Sakura's explosive tags scattered throughout the hole as Choji's enlarged hands kept Hidan from escaping. When it was all over and after a plenty of threats and curses from a now-buried Jashin follower, the three went to keep on their fight against the leader and his 6 bodies, against the Rinnegan. Naruto's battle was simply spectacular as he had managed to defeat the Tendril Man with one of the mightiest techniques any of them had ever seen. Fuuten Rasen Shuriken. Unfortunately though, the blonde was utterly exhausted after he had managed to hit his opponent, the remaining of his chakra lost in one mighty move. And now, all his friends combated against the 6 paths of pain. The God Realm seemed quite the hard one to beat as his power pushed back any attack or jutsu. All the bodies worked in perfect coordination, not a single mistake made. On and on they fought, each ninja falling one after the other, yet taking one of the bodies with him. In the end, only Kiba and Hinata remained vigilant. Gatsuga! The Inuzuka shouted as twin Kibas charged forward against the final body, God Realm. The attack was easily repelled though. What insolence, he said emotionlessly, his hands forming quick hand seals and then slamming to the ground. The still recovering Inuzuka caught in and caged in a small dome of rock and earth. No escape visible as he and his dog were lost from sight. After a few seconds and another set of hand seals, Kaden. Dragon Destroyer no Jutsu. Pain exclaimed, and out of his mouth flew an enormous fire dragon. He let out a fearsome roar and went directly on Hinata. Said girl couldn't run, she knew this dragon could follow her anywhere until it hit her. So she did the only thing possible. Hakasho Kaden, she exclaimed and started spinning. The mighty Hyuga technique finally came in handy as the dragon was repelled by the blue barrier. After a few seconds of immense pressure, the spin stopped and the dragon faded. Hinata had used the last of her chakra to block this rather powerful attack. The rest was gone in her Jukin, the intense melee battle she had with God Realm having exhausted her. She faltered, if only for a moment, and pain rushed in and gave her a good kick in the stomach that launched her on the nearby tree. His deathly pale face didn't betray any emotion as he neared. She groaned in pain as she tried to stand, her body though faltering. She felt as if her inner world was about to come out at the bare thought of standing and her feet felt numb from the extensive battle. They gave away and gravity took its toll as she fell back on the tree, helpless. Pain went forward to complete his task, a kunai in his hand and Rinnegan eyes gazing down upon the weakened Hyuga, she weakly looking up at him, trying to force her hands to move, to do something. But right as the leader of the Dawn was ready to let his blade slice her neck, his sensitive ears picked up a silent growl, and this growl made him feel something that he hadn't felt in years, an emotion that he had forgotten it even existed. Fear. Naruto could only watch the battle that took place before him, his friends lying around the battlefield, most of them unconscious or incapacitated from their fights. They were helpless. Pain would slice through each and every one of them when he was done with her. Her. Hinata, he was going to kill Hinata. He was going to kill them. No, he wouldn't allow this. He had the power to retaliate. He knew he had it, but what if his friends saw him? What if they saw what lied within? Pain's blade was now inches away from her neck. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't lose her. He couldn't allow one of his closest friends to slip away, to fall in the grasp of death. He would stop it, he would stop him. He tried to imagine her corpse, and that only added in the rage that had began building inside, the bloodlust that was about to conquer his senses, the fear that gripped his heart, the dread that filled his soul. No, Pain would die, and so he let it free. He let the power consume him as the red demonic chakra coursed through him, empowering his weakened body. Any injury his arm had suffered from the Fuuten Rasen Shuriken had vanished as the evil chakra enhanced his healing process. Unconsciously, he let out a silent growl, two tails forming behind him as he fought with every ounce of his control to not let any more of it sip in. He opened his eyes to gaze upon emotionless Rinnegan ones, gazing at him with wonder from afar. So, is this the power of a Jinchuriki? He could smirk at the scene, but Naruto didn't reply as the cloak of the fox took hold over his body, blood-red eyes glaring at the Rinnegan wielder. Said man only ignored the boy as he returned to his task. Hinata watched in awe and fear at the same time at the blonde, his golden hair now gone wild, his whisker marks thicker, his nails claws. She felt awe, for it was the first time she saw him giving off so much power. And fear, for the chakra was just swimming with evil, bloodlust, hate. Was Naruto really capable of such emotions? But all these thoughts left her mind as she saw pain returning to get done with her and then face the Jinchuriki, and dread took hold on her once more. She hated herself, now she would die, without ever allowing the boy she loved to know of her affection, to know of her feelings, to know that he really wasn't alone, that there was someone there the whole time. She wanted to scream it at him right there and then, yet she found her voice disobeying as fear had tightened her lips shut. The emotions overwhelmed her as her grip on consciousness faltered, allowing her to fall in an abyss of darkness without at least feeling the physical pain. But her heart ached, so much that she was worried she would have a heart attack before pain would kill her. Only one image and two words laced on her mind before darkness took over. It was the image of a grinning blonde teen, the words, "I'm sorry," intertwined with the picture. Pain didn't hesitate as the tip of his blade touched her soft skin. His muscles were ready to move and slice it open, before a clawed hand gripped it, the iron grip seemingly impossible to escape from. The Rinnegan master only glanced at the possessed blonde, the slightest raise of an eyebrow the only emotion of surprise evident in his features. A second before this boy was nearly 50 yards away, and now, in the blink of an eye he was right in front of him, giving him a death glare and having a frown on his face that spoke volumes. "Don't touch her," he said in a dark tone, his eyes full of hate. If the leader of the Dawn had emotions, he would certainly smirk at the boy's foolishness. And seeing what his friend probably meant to him, he would sincerely take great pleasure in cutting her throat. Without further ado, he used his power to send the Jinchuriki away, several yards beyond. He once more turned to finish what he had started, kunai in hand. Yet again, before he could end this, a claw made of seemingly dense red chakra crushed on him, sending him flying in the sky. His eyes widened slightly in amazement that he hadn't seen this coming. He witnessed the birth of several clones on the ground, 3 groups, haste evident as each team prepared their respective Udama Rasengan. Pain could see what was coming. He prepared a dozen of kunais and shuriken in each hand, sending the weaponry flying at the clones. He had to take out at least 2 groups, otherwise, it would be the end of him. The weapons never met their target though as 2 giant red claws protected the clones from them. The cloaked man then did the last thing that came in his mind. He prepared another dragon destroyer, sending it flying against a group of the clones, the Rasengan and the fire technique clashing and dissipating against each other. His special ability repelled the next Udama, sending both technique and clones away. Yet he knew that the third couldn't be stopped. He couldn't dodge in midair, neither could he repel it since his powers needed at least 2 more seconds of cooldown, 2 seconds that he didn't have. He closed his eyes, prepared for the end. Yet the technique hit nothing but paper, as both pain and the one that took him away seemingly disappeared into nothing. The real Naruto didn't bother to look at the scene. The Kyuubi-enhanced Udama Rasengan had probably reduced Pain's body to nothing. He slowly approached the fallen form of his comrade, of his friend. She was just lying there, probably unconscious from exhaustion. The menacing power resided back in him and he immediately felt his whole body going numb at the sudden lack of power. He fell to his knees, right next to her. Looking up and groaning in pain, he was glad of her serene face greeting his gaze, her body worn out from the battle, evident as it was from the slight bruises and cuts she sported. He could chuckle if it didn't hurt his whole chest in doing so, at the thought that he probably wasn't much better. He only allowed his body to rest next to her, a glance thrown around the battlefield. The statues that guarded over the valley were quite damaged now, the combat not allowing the landscape to escape its destructive grasp. Atop the Hokage's head was Choji and Sasuke, both probably unconscious. On Madara's head lied Lee and Sakura, Pain's summoning body lying in between them. And quite a few meters away from him was Kiba's chakra-draining prison, which had now dissipated, leaving a near-dead Inuzuka and his dog behind from chakra exhaustion. Beyond the trees, he could see the Anbu along with medic teams arriving. Good. He let one last glance fall on the girl next to him, a small smile on his face. He had done it, they were all alive. With these thoughts, he let unconsciousness grasp him as well, not knowing that the girl's head had somehow managed to rest on his shoulder. XXXXX. He should have known better. Tsunade was less than pleased that the blonde had encountered Akatsuki all on his own with only Sasuke for backup. If Hinata hadn't warned their friends about his absence and possible purpose, he would be long dead or lost in a cavern having his soul ripped out. She had picked up anyone she found in her way, her concern about the blonde more than obvious. Said girl was now lying on a bed next to him, vases with flowers decorating their respective sides. This room had only 2 beds, and strangely she was put in there with him. The others were lost somewhere within this maze people came to call hospitals, the bane of all shinobi. He was in the least critical condition, having suffered only chakra depletion. Yet for some reason his legs didn't obey him, so he would have to stay in bed for the next few days. He couldn't understand why. Before he fell unconscious, his legs were working just fine. Later on, Tsunade had come in to inform him about her displeasure over his actions, hug him to death for being safe, berating him for making her worry so much, and finally telling him why he couldn't move his legs. Apparently, one of the medic nins had found it fun to mess with the demon brat. Thus he had rendered the blonde's lower limbs useless and later on claimed that it had happened in combat. Yet this particular Sanin wasn't a legend in the field of medics for nothing, the damage was way too clean and carefully made to be done in the stress of a battle. Probably, the man's only mistake was that he didn't want to utterly destroy the teen's legs. His carefulness was his undoing. For Tsunade's punch was enough to probably send the man somewhere towards snow country. And from then on, all shinobi knew better than to touch the blonde, lest they desired to face the Hokage's famous fists. So there he was, lying in a hospital bed, waiting for something to happen. The whole day was utterly boring with most of his friends being in their respective beds as well, his legs useless, not able to support his weight yet. He was thankful that he could at least stretch and bend them, thus making his stay at least a little less uncomfortable. And Hinata had yet to wake up. The girl was sleeping peacefully a meter or so away from him. He would have forgotten she was even there if he hadn't occasionally glanced at her form. God, she was just so quiet. But he liked her that way. It wouldn't really do if he had another punch-lunching Sakura or bitching Ino in the company. She was a pleasant change in the demeanor of girls that surrounded his life, in a friendly manner, of course. Maybe a divine was in a good mood today, for his prayers for something to happen had been answered, though not in the way he really expected it. Tsunade walked in again. Figures, she would probably start berating him again or something like that. Yet he was surprised that along with her were 2 medics, holding an aged man in their hands. Surprise brat, the Hokage said cheerfully. Naruto looked at her clearly confused. Was the old guy supposed to be a present or something? You see, the hospital is quite full at the moment. We have no empty rooms, so we will probably have to narrow you guys down a little. She kept smiling as if she knew a detail the blonde didn't catch. Then his mind came to a conclusion. Oh my god. You're going to make me sleep with the grandpa? He practically yelled as he pointed a finger at the Hokage. He had absolutely no intention of staying in the same bed with an old guy. Shut up you little baka, she rubbed her temples as if trying to force back an oncoming headache. This patient has a disease that is contagious on physical contact, thus the medics wear suits and gloves as they carry him. Truth be told, he only just noticed the sickly color the man had and the fact that the medic nins were garbed from head to toe. So, you'll just have to make some more room in there. Come on, these beds are big enough for 2 I think. As she said these, she neared Hinata's bed, slowly picking up the petite girl in her mighty arms. Wait, did she mean that? Holy crap, I can't sleep with a girl. He pointed a finger at the Godem once more. Would you prefer him? She smiled sweetly at him, head gesturing towards the old man, glad at seeing his resolution falter. Geez, he sighed as he made room. The Hokage's smile then broke to an unnoticed grin as she gently tucked the girl in next to the blonde, he nearly on the edge of the bed as he tried to make room and probably avoid contact, a small blush on his face. It wasn't every day that he had girls on his bed, hell he could even sleep on the floor. It didn't take long for the 2 medics to finish with the old man and leave along with Tsunade. Outside, One of the medics couldn't help but ask, "Hokage-sama, there are still plenty of rooms around the hospital. Shouldn't we let the Uzumaki know?" The blonde woman turned to grin at him. "No, you shouldn't." Both men shivered, knowing better than to discard the small threat that accompanied these words. If Naruto wasn't going to leave Sakura alone soon, then the Hokage would force him. The good way, of course. The blonde had been bugging her apprentice for some time now, probably because she was more focused on Sasuke now that he was back, and who could blame her, really? Naruto just had to get over it, and she knew the perfect way. Plus, that girl already liked him, so no sooner that he was out of Sakura's feet, her discipline would return on her schedule with one less thing to worry about. Plus, the current head of the girl's clan had some plans rolling in his head nowadays, plans that the Hokage couldn't help but grin widely at. Win-win situations, she liked them, though there were other things to worry about right now. The blonde in the meantime though, had other things running in his mind. Or rather, his mind was in a blank state, the girl next to him having probably unconsciously stuck on him. She had even wrapped an arm over his chest. He could feel her slow warm breaths on his neck, the tingling sensation of her hair on his cheek, the warmth her body radiated filling everything, and what surprised him most was that it felt damn good. He wasn't used to so close human contact, especially from females. And especially from Hinata, the girl who fainted every single time he came too close. She was most likely going to faint the moment she woke up and realized where she was, and that would mean that she would keep herself stuck on him, and he wouldn't even be able to move away, since he was already near the edge of the bed and he couldn't even walk. Suddenly it seemed as if fate itself had made a conspiracy over this. He glanced at the girl once more, a small smile on her pale face as she snuggled a little closer, muttering something like, "warm." Well, he would at least enjoy it while it lasted, wouldn't he? He smiled. He sure would. XXXXX. The next few days rolled by fast, as if in a haste. Though for Naruto, it was as if the world was moving in slow motion, the warmth of the girl next to him making all his worries simply vanish, for he could hardly think of anything else for that matter. It was also very helpful when he went to sleep, for it was so easier to succumb to slumber when it was so warm, and strangely, Hinata just didn't wake up. Or rather, unbeknownst to the blonde of course, when she did wake up the first time and realized her surroundings, she fainted on the spot of course. The next days when she kept finding herself in the same or a slightly altered position, she would just keep quiet and enjoy the fairy tale for as long as it lasted. XXXXX. It was a few weeks after the final battle at the Valley of the End. Konoha had retrieved most of the corpses from the battleground, even Hidan's buried one, in pieces of course. It was a little creepy that the man's head kept cursing them to dear heavens, but the Hokage would make sure he would be buried again soon, somewhere safer. Naruto in the meantime, while having recovered and out of the hospital, was walking down the streets of Konoha heading to the best ramen shop in the universe. Ichiraku Ramen was the best ramen stand in Konoha for him, its flavors unmatched around the world. His casual stroll there was peaceful and quiet, the streets of Konoha being rather unpopulated today. He took a sit there, contemplating on things he would otherwise label as trivial, maybe. All that mattered usually was to get a good deal of training, date Sakura-chan and rise to the top as the Hokage. What was bugging him right now then? His order of miso special came rather quickly, on the house from Tucci, who was more than happy to have his favorite customer out of hospital. Naruto smiled at the simple remembrance of the structure. Wait, since when did he like hospitals? Maybe, he was most likely hallucinating at the moment. If he said to anyone he liked hospitals, people would surely think he was crazy. So he finished up his ramen, and after, roughly counting, 10 more bowls, headed towards the training grounds to probably call it a day. He knew a spot near the lake which was usually used for Sweden training. It was just perfect during the sunset, the waters glittering in the setting light, and when the moon finally took its place in the dark sky, its shadow would be cast on the crystal waters of the lake. A majestic sight to behold and the perfect way to relax. He was training all morning now, and well-earned rest was his favorite drug to close the day smoothly. And there he was, a few meters away from his personal spot, when he realized that it wasn't so personal anymore. It was easy to notice who it was. Even from behind, the dark blue hair and lavender white jacket gave away everything. Unless if there was any Hinata wannabe in Konoha, she wanted to stay somewhere away from her problems. Somewhere she could simply forget everything for a while, just escape reality. The demands of her father, the rules of the clan, her responsibilities as the heir, everything. She wanted all this to vanish. As she tried to let her mind drift away along with the setting sun, she noticed footsteps on the grass behind her. She turned around quickly to see who it was, surprise evident on her lavender eyes. She immediately blushed and turned around again to look at the lake, her cheeks having a rather bright shade of pink. He walked closer and saw her turning around to look. Though weird as it was, she turned back to the lake, maybe too quickly for him to not get a little suspicious. True, he wasn't a genius when it came to others' emotions, but he knew all too well how someone acted when he wanted to avoid someone. Humanity tended to do it to him occasionally anyway. "May I sit here or you don't want company?" he said, shooting her one of his trademark grins as she turned again at the sound of his voice. If he knew the girl well enough, she was most unlikely to decline. She was too kind to send someone away whatsoever. Her eyes went wide and she looked down at the grass. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. You see, can sit here," she answered, her voice always in that soft tune. How could he describe her voice really? Maybe of an angel. He let the thought slide away as he sat down next to her, gazing at the sunset with a wide smile. "Thanks. You see, this is my favorite spot near the lake. I come here at times," he said, his voice a little quieter than usual. This place could so easily calm him down. The scenery was just too good for him to ruin with his yelling. The girl, though, having her attention on other things, blushed at seeing how close he was. "F for what?" she asked gently. He smiled even more, making her blush brighter. "Well, I come to think usually," he said. "What are you here for?" He returned the question, looking at the petite form beside him that was finding the ground before her strangely amusing all of a sudden. "Well, I come to think too," she said, her voice trailing off in the last words. He smiled again. "For what?" he asked, his voice half serious, half teasing. She raised her eyes to meet his, and blushed again when she saw that he was looking at her, but she just couldn't get off these eyes. She finally looked away and tried to gather the words. "Anyo. I just want to get away from my concerns about the clan, about my life. I just wish the problems could just fade away. I wish I wasn't that weak for them. I just want to forget everything, if only for a moment," she said, and suddenly she felt two hands holding her shoulders. He turned her around to look at him in the eye. She blushed a bright red, as she always did when he touched her, of course, but simply couldn't avert her gaze from these two blue orbs, not anymore. "Hinata-chan, how many times must I say it? You are not weak. We have talked about this before. Stop thinking so low of yourself. In their eyes, you might seem weak, but you and I know that you are not. Let them believe what they want. You are not weak. You never were in my eyes," he said, trailing off at the last words and looking away. She could have swore she saw a small blush before he turned around to hide his features in the orange sunlight. She smiled, for she knew better than to take his encouraging words for granted. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," she said, and he lifted his arms from her shoulders. She felt so happy. For at least once, she made him blush. For one reason or another, she just did. And her heart was pounding even more now. "You know, Hinata-chan? I feel confused. Sakura-chan was always a friend to me. I always asked her on dates and she turned me down every single time. I just hoped that she would see me the way I saw her, and now that Sasuke is back, I just can't help but notice that there's no chance, not that there was before." He chuckled at his own words, yet Hinata couldn't believe in her ears. Naruto didn't like Sakura anymore? Truth be told, yes, she was closer to Sasuke now, but that didn't hold Naruto back before. What had changed now? She had to confirm it. "Are you sure you like her? I mean, Sasuke-san wasn't a problem before, was he?" she asked calmly, lavender eyes locked on his form with care, the stutter nearly out of her voice. She had become way more comfortable around him these last few months since they spent so much time together, on missions or on accidental meetings around the town. She was even able to not faint when he was very close, though the hospital thing was a rather more complicated matter. "Yeah, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel right anymore, going after her, that is," he said a bit sadly, as if it pained him to think this way. Maybe she was right, maybe he didn't like Sakura that way anymore. She didn't return anything anyway. But what was wrong? What had changed so he didn't like Sakura now? He felt his heart getting heavy. "Maybe," Hinata started to say, trying to comfort him after seeing the sadness in his eyes, but he cut her off and his next words was something that she never expected to come from his mouth, not his. "What is love, Hinata-chan?" he asked, his sad eyes looking straight into her pale lavender ones. He could have sworn he lost a heartbeat when he saw her pale face been bathed in the fading orange sunlight. But that was trivial, maybe he was just tired. He couldn't help but notice the surprise these lavender pools held. Maybe she felt uncomfortable to answer, maybe she didn't even know. But she was better than that. "Well, I think it's to devote yourself to someone. To want to be with him no matter his flaws, no matter his personality. You want to be close to him, to protect him. You love them for their flaws and respect them for their strengths. They mean the world to you," she said and looked away from him at the last sentence, as if reminiscing something that she held dear, a dream that her hands reached out for, yet seemed so far away. He could see sadness in her eyes, the pain that loomed inside for things that maybe belonged to the past, maybe belonged to the present or in the future. That's what he liked about her eyes. The eyes of a usual Hyuga were always cold, uncaring, a block of ice that held back their soul. Yet hers were like twin moons that reflected her very essence in them, each feeling dancing in these pools as if wanting to catch someone's attention. At that moment, he wanted to hug her tight and tell her all was all right. He wanted to take that sadness away. He wanted to make her happy, for she probably deserved it, and maybe more. She was a friend, a close one, and seeing friends being hurt in any way was a burden he would carry till it was solved. But he couldn't move. What was happening? He never had problem to reveal his emotions to Sakura, or anyone else for that matter. But here, it just didn't feel right, though he wanted to do it. He wanted to give the comfort he was once deprived, with all his heart. Before he could decide what to do, she stood up. Her eyes had sadness in them, reflecting emotions that were like the waters of a calm lake. Disturb them, and the ripples will reach out till the very shore of each and every side. She herself wanted to hug him in an attempt to find comfort. She wanted to hold on him and let him tell her it was all right. She wanted to cry all her problems on his shoulder. But she didn't know how he would react. He could freak out and run away. She didn't want this to happen. She wanted him to be close. Her thoughts were interrupted when he stood up too. "Wanna walk? I don't have anything to do really, so we can go at a park or something," he said, his eyes gleaming with happiness. She smiled back. She had forgotten that the particular individual was special. Sadness was a word he didn't accept in his vocabulary, really. "I'd love to," was her reply as she smiled shyly. He smiled back at her, making her blush. "She looks cute when she blushes like that, He was surprised at his own thoughts, but before he could finish a complete estimation of what the words that popped in his head meant, a certain pink-haired girl came into the scene. "Oi, Naruto, Tsunade-sama wants to see you," she shouted from the other side of the training grounds. The fervor of her shout, maybe even matching Naruto's usual tone, said boy only flinching. Was he really that loud? The med-nin then finally noticed the Hyuga who was blushing next to him. What's Hinata doing here? She thought to herself, not quite used to the blonde hanging around with her, since she could barely communicate properly with him as long as she remembered. "Oi, Sakura, want to go on a date?" Naruto shouted back while grinning widely. Sakura twitched an eyebrow in irritation. He was thinking about that even now? She would most likely have to tell her sensei that Plan A had failed. Hinata felt her heart fall to the ground, almost literally. Maybe he liked Sakura in the end. He just hadn't really realized it yet and asked her so he could figure it out. Now she wanted the earth to swallow her, for even though Sakura was sure to decline, the blonde's feelings seemed unwavering. "Baka, Tsunade-sama wants to see you. There's no time for such things." She yelled back and walked away, clearly annoyed, head held high. They would probably have to enter Plan B, which was most certainly more dangerous, but most certainly would be more fruitful, and in the long run, he would at last stop bugging her on this, focus somewhere else, and leave her to finally tend properly to her obligations without the fear of a blonde head jumping out of nowhere and asking her on a date. Naruto turned to Hinata to see the sadness covering her whole face. Had he done something wrong? Well, he grinned widely. "See what I mean? It's like asking a wall on a date. No matter how many times you say it, the answer will always be the same," he said and began laughing lightly at his own little joke. Her eyes were wide as she looked at him. Maybe there was a chance, wasn't there? It's getting funnier every time. If you exclude the part that she starts beating me senseless, of course, he said and began laughing again. She couldn't help but giggle at the comment. He smiled even more when he heard her laugh. It was cute. Hinata-chan, he began in order to get her attention. She stopped giggling to look at him with questioning eyes, seeking answers on his very face. You should smile more often, he said and gave her one of his toothy smiles. She blushed a crimson red and nodded while smiling, a small escaping her lips. He smiled again. Okay, I got to go. See you later, Hinata-chan, he said as he started running towards the Hokage Tower while waving a hand at her in goodbye. She couldn't feel happier at the moment, for so many good and promising moments had made their appearance in only one evening. Yet she herself had matters to attend to, if she remembered correct. Getting back to the manor would most likely be a good start. When she finally reached the gates of her dreaded home, the guard on duty immediately spotted her. Who wouldn't spot or know the heir of the Hyuga clan, anyway? Hinata-sama, he said while bowing lightly, your father, Hiyashi-sama, requested your presence at his study immediately. He said politely. She nodded and smiled at him, one of the fake smiles she always used to hide her sadness within the cold walls of what she at least tried to call home. When she reached the door to her father's study, her knock on the concrete was answered by a serious, monotone yet commanding voice, the voice of the head of the clan, the leader of the Hyuga. Hinata, come in, she heard her father calling. She obeyed and opened the door slowly. She walked in and bowed, keeping her spine perfectly straight as she was taught to do always in the presence of an elder or higher up. Especially in the Hyuga household, where its members were trained to be body readers. Posture meant everything, for your body could speak volumes your lips could not. Did you ask to see me, Oto-san, father? She asked with her soft, calm voice, the fear hidden well. For whenever her father called her here, it surely wasn't good, at least for her. Indeed, Hiyashi replied in his usual serious tone. Sit down, Hinata. I've got something important to tell you, he said, a mild pain of amusement in his voice, something really faint, but Hinata caught it, for her father rarely allowed his tone to be graced by such emotions. She kept her posture steady, her mind waiting and running through endless possibilities as to what the elder would want. He took a sip from his tea. Hinata, he began. Hinata, you do understand your responsibilities as the heir, don't you? He asked, deadly serious. She groaned inwardly. It was like the millionth time he asked this. Yes, Oto-san, was her same reply as every other time he had asked said question. And it was never for good, yet her father surprised her, with an emotion that found its way on his face that anyone would think that the Hyuga leader was incapable of. He smiled. So, you do understand that as a woman and future head, you will need someone by your side. He said as he took one more sip of his tea, the smile residing a little. She dreaded what he was going to say next, for she knew where this was going. It had happened to nearly all the other females of the main branch anyway. Hinata, I and the council have decided that, now the smile was worn off. He looked at her straight in the eye and she, to his surprise, looked back, bracing herself for the next words. You are of age to marry, so as your father it falls in my hands to arrange a marriage. Now she was about to scream, but her manners and self-control didn't allow her to express what her very soul was shouting out. But Oto-san, she started to mumble, but he raised his hand in motion for her to silence. Normally, Hinata, your husband would be decided by the council alone. But, since you are my daughter, I wanted what is best for you, at least I hope it is. He said, thinking the last part to himself, and that calmed her down somehow, at least facially. The noble leader had no idea what was going on behind her mask of impassiveness. He had no idea what storms wrestled behind the calmness of her eyes to break free. I chose your husband to be from one of the noblest clans in the Fire Country. The man is the heir of the Akake clan, honorable and strong people they are. It is up to you to marry him or not and keep your honor as a woman and as the future head, he said. Hinata knew better than this. When he said, keep your honor, he truly meant, do it or else you will fall in my eyes. She knew that if she didn't, he would look at her as nothing, she would lose his respect, at least the bits of it that she had gained over the years. Plus, arranged marriages was something very few could escape from, it all rested on if the male accepted it on his part. As the female had no say in it, for the father took her place in this decision. She already knew who she wanted. But her father's respect was something she wanted too, so dear heaven, what would she do? Then Hiyashi interrupted her thoughts again. The marriage will take place in 2 months from now. Until then, you're to stay in Konoha. Soon enough, maybe in a month or so, you will meet your husband-to-be. His face was emotionless. As always, all emotions that dared grace him before now vanished. I presume you understand? He asked. She only nodded, her lips not opening in fear of what would come out. Very well. You can go now, I have further matters to attend to. He said, and with a bow and a quiet, yes father, she was off. Hiyashi looked at her slowly fleeting form. We shall see. Hinata, he thought as he finished up the rest of his tea and gazed upon the bane of all leaders throughout history and beyond. Paperwork. The girl couldn't do much at the time, couldn't even think. She went to her room at the 2nd floor of the manor. Things seemed to be going so well, and in a few minutes, all was ruined. She lied on her bed and with the emotions overwhelming her, she cried, XXXXX. In the meantime, at Tsunade's office, Naruto was freaked out, with all the meaning this word can hold. Normally, whenever you went in, you could find the Hokage sleeping on reports and books, sake oozing around the atmosphere of the room. But when she was awake, it was something serious, dead serious, for the blonde medic to stray away from her occasional naps. He gulped and hoped for the best, yet planned for the worst. Good, the windows were open. Tsunade only sighed while letting her hands drop on the desk. She looked up at Naruto, the blonde still grinning widely, but his posture was enough for her to see he was nervous. The shivering of his body didn't help him conceal it whatsoever. Naruto, she began, as you well know, even if I hate to admit it. I'm old. Naruto now was scared shitless. Tsunade admitted she was old? What the hell? The apocalypse was coming. Tsunade always wore a genjutsu that made her look like a beautiful young lady around her 20 IEs or 30 IEs, with an oversized cleavage to add to it. Naruto knew though, that she was over 50, considering that she and Jiraiya were generally the same age. I'm not too old, but I know I'm old. My drinking habits and my life are getting on to me. She said, and her voice was so serious you thought the end of the world was coming, but there was a tint of normalcy since she took back on the I'm old thing a little. I am looking forward to retire, she said. Now Naruto was gleaming. If the current Hokage was about to retire, then that could only mean one thing, that herefor. He thought that life couldn't be better. He had a good feeling about this. Konoha will soon need a new Hokage. Now his heart was about to explode. And, placing note of your successful battle against the whole Akatsuki organization, which all wear S-ranked missing and legendary nins. I presume you are capable of. She now smirked as Naruto was about to start yelling from joy. Oh, how she liked toying with an open book like him. Finding the next Hokage, she said, and Naruto felt all his dreams vanish in a flash. What did she mean, find him? Wasn't he damn enough? He looked down in disappointment. He could cry, but he knew it would be kind of weird, considering the situation and his age. He looked up again to see a grinning Tsunade. Naruto, you're to find the youngest Hokage in all of Konoha's history. She said, her grin wide as ever. Naruto was disappointed again. He wanted to be the youngest Hokage. Where should I look then? He asked, sadness covering his words as he let out a mental sigh. It was for the good of the village, was it not? Tsunade couldn't hold herself. She battled hard to keep from bursting into laughter from his expression. She only chuckled and reached for her drawer. He was still looking down though. Right here, she said. He looked up at her and saw that she was holding a mirror. He was now confused to say the least. Who the hell was he supposed to find in there? Tsunade Oba-chan, Granny, are you sure you're okay? He asked, pointing a finger at the mirror. She chuckled again, I'm fine. Come over here and take a look, Naruto. She said, motioning him with her free hand to come closer. He did and looked in the mirror, only to see his curious reflection. In there you will find the next Hokage, she said, and he looked up to gaze with confusion in her brown eyes. But, I can only see me, he said, trailing off at the last words. His eyes went wide, he started sweating and his heart was about to burst out of his chest, all these without him even realizing. See, you already found him, Tsunade said and burst out laughing, for she couldn't hold it anymore. It was just too much teasing him in such ways. This was one thing she was ought to miss. Oh, you had to look at the expression of your face when, ah ha 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 ha. She tried to speak through the laughter. She was hitting her desk with her fist while having the other hand curled around her head as she kept on with her rampage of suppressed laughter, giggles, chuckles, and generally all these joyous emotions. When she finally finished, she looked up to see Naruto's reaction. He was just standing there, his face completely blank as he just stared at the mirror, probably waiting for his reflection to answer a question in spoken. "Naruto?" Tsunade asked, still trying to stop the little chuckles that were left, and out of nowhere. The peaceful night of Konoha was interrupted by one single scream of joy. "Woohoo!" was heard across the hidden village, the sound practically echoing for a few seconds. All who resided in this otherwise calm town that night looked outside their windows to see what had happened, lights flickering to life around the streets and any ninja that was awake looking towards the Hokage Tower, trying to spot any kind of danger. But anyone who knew a specific blonde well enough were somehow aware of what had happened and couldn't help but smile. Hinata, still crying on her bed, heard the scream of joy, and she knew that only one person in the whole world could scream that loud, and for only one reason: he did it. She yelled in her mind, and now the tears that came down her cheeks were tears of joy, trails of previous ones still visible as the waterworks opened once more. She was happy that at least he had his dreams come true. XXXXX. Tsunade had fought hard to stop Naruto from bouncing around. When she also told him that she was going to adopt him as his mother, since it would make it easier for people to accept him as the heir, she had to use her inhuman strength to keep him away from kissing her on the cheek. He was told that the official announcement for his adoption and his declaration as the next Hokage when Tsunade finally retired would come up in 2 months. For now, he just had to go to his apartment and pack things up. Tomorrow, he would move to Tsunade's house. The Hokage had always felt him like a son, though he called her granny. She always wanted to do it, bring him in her house, give him a home he was deprived of since childhood. She knew how cruel life had been to him, and she wanted to give him the family he never had. She also knew this boy had more than enough in him to be the next Hokage, and she was proud that he could even control the power of the Kyuubi inside him, to some extent at least. He was 17 years old now, and soon, the youngest Hokage in the history of the village hidden in the leaf. XXXXX. Naruto now was walking the quiet streets of the morning Konoha, gleaming all over. In about 2 hours he would go get his stuff and move them at Tsunade's house, and probably live with the Hokage for quite some time. And while his stroll led him through the quiet streets, his attention failed to notice a certain dark blue-haired girl sitting on a bench, lavender eyes empty as she stared into nothing. When he got close enough, a faint smell of lavender caught his attention. There weren't such flowers around here. Averting his gaze from the street and onto the producer of the scent, his eyes met no other than "Ohio, Hinata," he said when he walked next to her. She was shot out of her daydreams to see who it was that interrupted her thoughts that she was all too glad that were away, even for a moment. Her eyes were immediately filled with joy when she finally took in the blonde hair, whisker marks and gleaming smile. She blushed but suddenly grew sad as she remembered what her father told her yesterday, his words running in her tired mind once more. How she wished that yesterday just didn't exist, at least at some point. He noticed the sadness in her expression, the fear that etched itself in her eyes, emotions that didn't belong here whatsoever. "Something's bothering you, Hinata-chan? Want to talk about it?" he said while sitting beside her. She blushed again but didn't look at him, the ground in front of her suddenly seeming quite interesting. Nothing, Naruto-kun, nothing," she said while trailing off in the last words, finding hard to talk all of a sudden, as if his very presence triggered things that she would prefer to stay buried, if only for a little while. True, nothing could compare to the pain she felt right now. "Come on, Hinata, you know you can tell me anything," he said and grinned widely. She looked at him and her sadness grew even more when she saw that trademark grin of his. She decided that letting him know wouldn't be a big deal now, would it? She would at least get some of the pain out of her chest, get some of it out and let it vanish in his kind smiles. "Oto-san told me something really important last night," she said, the sadness taking away the stutter because now, she tried hard to keep the tears from falling at the mere remembrance of the words that practically doomed her. He looked at her expression and could barely resist the urge to hug her. Such pain, it was as if he looked at himself in the mirror when he was young, when everyone and everything hated him, but this couldn't be the case. Who the hell could hate Hinata anyway? She was too cute for that. He reduced the sudden urge for affection though at simply placing a hand on her shoulder, which made her blush lightly once more. "What is it, Hinata-chan?" he said gently and seriously, the girl battling in her mind to find the appropriate words. It was strange of him to be like that, to really show affection and care for someone, but somehow, she managed to trigger that side of him. She just did. "He told me that. I'm going to." She now couldn't hold it. A few tears went down her cheeks but the strands of her hair hid them from the blonde's view, she holding fast on any restraints left in order to keep the waterworks of her eyes under control. "Get married," she managed to say as her lips parted, her voice not above a whisper while fighting hard to keep herself from sobbing. Naruto on the other hand was confused. Marriage was something good, right? She should be happy. He was stupid at times, yes, but he knew much enough about human emotions to understand that she wasn't happy at all with it. Sadness was floating all over her, as if the bare thought of this word was crushing something, a dream of a child that grew up with the hope that one day it would come true, a dream that the dreadful decisions of its father had ruined just so easily. "Then why aren't you happy?" he asked again, his voice low and sincere. Because I don't want to," she said and started sobbing for she couldn't hold it anymore, couldn't hold fast against the waterfall of emotions that placed dread on her heart, fear in her mind. Is it that bad? Is he that bad? He asked again, he, referring to the groom. She shook her head. "No, I heard he comes from a noble family and that he is a good guy, but, she said fighting a fierce battle to keep herself from crying out loud, from letting her frustration be sounded up to the heaven and maybe beyond. I don't want to," she barely whispered and started sobbing even harder. She couldn't take it easy, no, not anymore. She now started crying, pitying herself at the same time for showing such a weakness in front of him. Naruto could only think of one thing that he could do about crying girls, one thing that he had seen many people do to each other to give comfort, to show that they were there. A single show of affection that, strangely, could at times work miracles. He moved his hands to take her in a hug, but before he could even flinch she launched herself at him, wanting to cry it all out, not caring if he would back up or not, she needed to do it. He didn't fall down, since the distance between them was barely a yard from the beginning. She was crying her soul out on his chest, she washed the pain away in the only thing she found fit at the moment. And he did the only thing he thought he could to comfort her, to help. He placed his hands around her and held her close in an embrace. She had her hands on his chest and her head at the crook of his neck, salty tears trailing her pale cheeks once again as they slid down her face and on his jacket. A small weight left her heart that he didn't back up, he didn't leave her alone. Normally, she could have fainted already, but the urge to find a sanctuary, the simple need for contact with someone that she knew was capable to actually care, were bigger than her whole shyness together. She felt even better when he warped his arms around her, filling her with his warmth, letting her breathe the aroma that was clearly his. She felt safe in there, as if all the worries were held outside by his hands. She was actually having a small feeling at the back of her heart, a feeling that what was going to happen with the passage of time was going to diminish in the darkness that would loom over her for the rest of her life in about 2 months. She felt happy. He was surprised at how warm she was yet again. Her hair smelled like lilacs and lavender, the faint aroma enjoyable to drink in, to enjoy. He placed his chin on her head and rubbed her back with his hand, the motion soothing the sobbing girl, if only a little. "It's all right," he whispered. He felt really good that he could at least comfort her, that he could do something to pull the sadness away. For once at least, he could comfort her like she did when he was depressed, though she didn't hug him back then, but little did it matter now. He felt her shook her head against his chest while still sobbing. "No, it's not," she said between her silent wails. I will have even more responsibilities. I'll have to carry his children," she said now sobbing harder and looked up at the cerulean orbs she so much admired, maybe loved more than anything even. But worst of all, I don't love him, I don't think I ever will," she said and now buried her face in his chest again, continuing to cry. He could feel tears running anew as she continued, the marks of sadness falling on his jacket, one after the other. He wished he could do something more, something that could help, something that could take all these away, yet for now, he just held her tighter. She did the same, wrapping her hands on his jacket, wanting him to drain all the sadness away. "I think that, maybe if you get to know him better," he said, but she knew clearly that he didn't mean it, for his voice was far too quiet, lacking greatly in the confidence each of his words usually bathed in. He was sad too, but it was because she was sad? Or was it? No. She didn't want to believe it, not yet at least. She wanted to enjoy every precious second while wrapped in this embrace. She didn't want to let go, ever, and to her oblivion neither did he. But they both knew that they had to, for good things don't really last long, do they? Well, they would make this one last as long as they could. After what seemed like an eternity, they broke apart. Between her sadness and the tears drying on her cheeks, she smiled, but he knew it was fake. He had seen both kinds of smiles she had, and this one was awfully similar to the ones he put on all the time, every time he was depressed, every time that his heart was in pain. But he didn't want to push the matter. He still held her hand though, and when she realized it, she blushed a slight pink, glad by his affection. For some reason, he wasn't happy for her. Not only because she wasn't happy, that was as clear as a cloudless sky. He too wasn't happy at all. He felt strange, his heart weighted like a ton at the moment. I had to do it, Naruto-kun. It's what's the best for the clan, and she didn't finish when she saw the glare of sadness in his eyes. The glare of a pain similar to hers. The pain of having things bestowed on you, yet you having no say in it, having no choice. And what's best for you? Haven't you thought of that? We are humans above all, Hinata. He said, his voice serious and his cerulean eyes that matched the wide blue yonder looking straight into her pale lavender moons. She shook her head and smiled, this time a true one. Let's drop it, Naruto-kun, please, she pleaded. He looked away for a moment and then nodded. He smiled back at her. So, want to hear something really cool? He asked, his eyes now gleaming with happiness as he changed the subject. She reflected that gleam too now. She wanted him to be happy. She nodded. Yosh, then can you come by my apartment? I've got some packing to do and I can't carry it all on my own. He said while rubbing the back of his head and laughing nervously. Pack for what? She asked confused. I'll tell you on the way. He said, and with that he grabbed her hand that he had left a few seconds before again and started rushing towards his apartment laughing like an idiot, the Hyuga girl following suit behind, a wide smile on her own pale face. He had probably forgotten he knew the shadow clone jutsu. Oh well, better for her. XXXXX. He explained the whole situation to her and she seemed to be interested in every word he said, every letter that left his lips. To tell the truth, now that he thought about it, she always had paid attention to him. She was the only one that he never needed to shout in order for her to listen, she always listened. Of course, he had let go of her hand a while ago so that someone couldn't go and spread rumors around, for he knew all too well what a rumor could do, damn too well. When they reached the apartment, most of the stuff was already packed. He made 3 cage buncheons and ordered them to pick up some of the travel bags, filled with clothes and other things. They did as they were told rather quickly. His clones seemed quite eager today. The furniture had to stay here though. Truth is, he could make an army of clones to carry the whole apartment if he wanted to, but he really enjoyed Hinata's company more than anything. He didn't understand why, but her being near him just brightened his day. So the blonde and the heiress of a mighty clan picked up what remained and strolled off towards the Hokage's mansion, clones swiftly following behind. When they reached it, Naruto was, of course, awestricken. The boy that had lived all his life in an apartment was now gazing upon one of the biggest buildings in Konoha. The home of the Godem Hokage. This place was bigger than all the apartments in his block of flats put together. They entered the house and were greeted by Tsunade herself, the Hokage practically beaming, though they both labeled it as her being happy for the boy who had finally moved in somewhere better. She had some servants who called him Sama, though he asked them not to take his things at his room on the first floor. The living room was enormous with a big dining table in the middle. Candles could be found on the walls letting their weak yet warm light bath the room. The kitchen was looking like how a regular one could, though it was way bigger, tiled floor and counters everywhere. His room was, amazingly, as big as the kitchen. He had a king-size bed, plasma TV, a stereo, even a desk. A big one, may I say. Now how the hell the Hokage had brought such technological gizmos of the West in the elemental countries, he couldn't really tell, neither did he care for now. The view of Konoha outside his windows that lied at the left and right of his bed was amazing. He had a clear view of half the village along with the Hokage monuments. When he was introduced to the staff and to the house, he went outside to explore the mysterious and quite large garden. Hinata was with him, examining the flowers and taking deep breaths of their aromas, seemingly enjoying it. He couldn't help but smile at the sight of the tranquil expression on her face. He wished he could do more though, he wished he could. XXXXX. Tsunade had him with her in her office for the next month, teaching him the work of a Hokage. He found the paperwork extremely boring and understood now why she was asleep every time he would walk in, for the bane of all Hokages was the greatest pain he would have to endure in this position. He really liked though giving away missions. Soon, he had learned many things about how things rolled and Tsunade was nearly ready to put him into it. There was one more thing he had to do though to earn this final test. Hinata in the meantime spent her month wandering around her house and out in the streets. Sometimes she could run into Naruto and talk about how things were going. He would complain about how boring the paperwork was and she would tell him her ideas about some of the paperwork matters he had mentioned. The subject was clearly boring, but Naruto's playful mannerisms and her own giggling had somehow managed to make it a tad more interesting. They were talking more about themselves though. Naruto told her about many of his adventures and was surprised at how many things she knew about him and how little he knew about her. He despised the fact that she was forced to marry someone. He promised to himself that he would change this specific tradition at all costs when he would become Hokage, for such marriages, even if they could be profitable at the respective clans, could usually be a ruin for the individuals, people who had no say in it, people who had no choice but to suffer this fate. No, he wouldn't let people live the consequences of others' decisions, he wouldn't let her to fall away like that. Life right now seemed so common. He was so used to it. Little did he know though, that soon enough, their lives would never be the same, for better or for worse. Life was cruel, so what? Humans live to face their problems, for if they don't, the problems will easily consume them. So what can an average human do, really? Yet the question here is rather of the style, what a shinobi can do when he faces his problems. Simple answers like, killing them, and disposing of evidence, was one shinobi way of dealing with problems, especially when said annoyances were mortal. Yet, roughly speaking, there are people among this amazingly increasing population of fighting individuals that can even desperately search for a solution that lies beyond blood spilling and hopefully, beyond unnecessary violence. Such a ninja was Hyuga Hinata, a girl whose heart was just too kind to give in to displays of gore like that. No, she was beyond the irrational thought of simply killing problems away, for using such a solution over a problem could easily introduce you to a dozen more. So the heiress of the Hyuga clan was restless, lost for countless hours in the library of her family, searching for a solution that, by all means, wouldn't have her killing somebody, hopefully. Days passed like this, the heiress lost in her thoughts and research, unaware of one certain Hyuga's eyes on her. Said man couldn't help but smile, if only for a split second. His Byakugan deactivated as he took another sip from his tea. Only time will tell. XXXXX. Oi, Ba-chan, care to teach me anything about arranged marriages? The blonde asked the Hokage as he sat beside her on his own chair next to the Godimes, a pile of paperwork next to him as he mimicked the medic in her stamping of papers with the Hokage seal. Why would you care for something like that, Naruto? She asked, alleviating her gaze from the paperwork to glance at the blonde teen, who only rubbed the back of his head. Nothing, it just popped in my mind and, well, I'm just interested in it, okay? He said, a nervous smile on his face as the Hokage eyed him warily. Said blonde woman took a sip from her tea that rested beside the paperwork, sitting back in her chair, the liquid perfect to calm her nerves. Tea was second only to sake for her. How so? She asked with a playful smile. The teen in question only let his face falter at her words. Would she keep beating around the bush or what? Anyway, truth be told Naruto, neither do I know much about it. It's something that occasionally happens between clans mostly, to tell the truth. Her gaze drifted over to the brown door across the room as she let her mind drift off. Usually, it's a contract made between the parents of the respective children. Usually the individuals have no say in it if I'm correct, as long as the parents agree of course and don't mind their child's own opinion. She sighed as she let another sip of the steaming tea slid down her throat, the taste it left behind tingling her sense of taste slightly before it resided. So, let's say that one for example is forced in it, is there no way out? Naruto asked warily, his attention focused on the Godem as she glanced at him. Truth be told, she didn't expect the blonde to push so much into this matter. You can kill one of the individuals if you like, she smiled as he winced and grinned sheepishly at her, a sign that he thought of this particular solution as ridiculous. Indeed, Naruto wasn't one to put human life before his own needs and wants. Or, have the male of the contract decline it, she smirked a little. Usually the male counterpart agreed wholeheartedly to the choice of his parents, especially when it was for a Hyuga. So Tsunade let herself slowly finish what was left in the cup of tea and let it rest in between the stacks of seemingly endless paperwork as she picked the Hokage seal stamp up once more. We can talk some more about this later, Naruto. For now, we have work here, don't we? She smiled at him and he only nodded with a sigh, mumbling things about betrothals and how he was going to ruin this tradition the moment he got the chance. The Hokage's smile didn't falter even for a second as she returned to her paperwork, already knowing that her plans were working out smoothly for now. XXXXX. It was late in the afternoon that the Hokage-to-be had finally escaped the masses of paperwork that loomed inside the desk room of a certain blonde Godem. If he had 3 wishes, one of them would be for this bane of leaders to disappear. The other 2, he had a little trouble thinking on which he would spend on. Even though his mind already had the answers, he just denied them. Once again he found himself at Ichiraku's stand, a steaming ramen bowl, the perfect way to relinquish all this stress that was building up inside him day after day. So many things to do: train, help a friend, do paperwork along with Tsunade. Few as these tasks seemed, they were quite more tiring than what the average man is used to. So he sat down on one of the stools, Tucci busy somewhere in the back of the store and Ayame probably having called it a day. It was kind of late anyway. He reached in his pocket, surprised to find 2 food coupons instead of 1. Right, he had forgotten to use one of them yesterday afternoon before he went to the training grounds. His mind drifted off as he kept gazing upon the coupons, not actually thinking on how to use them. Hell, he had even forgotten where he was. Tucci emerged from the back of the store, a wide grin finding its way on his face when he spotted a certain mane of blonde hair behind the counter. He prepared himself for a heartfelt welcome, when he noticed his favorite customer looking at the 2 pieces of paper in his hands like it was the first time he saw such a thing. He sighed, finding fitter to leave the blonde to his thoughts until he decided on whatever he was thinking about. Better prepare some ramen, he smiled to himself as he went over the kitchen. Said blonde teen was suddenly shot out of his thoughts as he heard a soft yelp from behind him. Glancing over his shoulder, he couldn't help but smile at the newcomer. "Oi, Hinata, care to join in?" he asked as he waved the 2 pieces of paper, said girl entering the store, a slight blush on her face, a blush that always seemed to adore her features. Anyo, okay, arigato, Naruto-kun, she said with a small smile of her own, eyes closed in slight embarrassment as she sat down next to him, long blue hair wavering with the movement, sending him a slight wave of their smell. Lavender and roses, he thought to himself, his facial expression not faltering one bit in contradiction to his thoughts. It was then that Tucci finally emerged from the kitchen once more, holding at least 4 bowls of miso ramen. "Oh, Naruto. Got company I see," the old man said with a smile as the teen grinned back at him, the girl next to him blushing and practically trying to hide in her jacket, though more likely because she tried to stifle her own giggle. "Here you go old man, 2 coupons. It's on me today, Hinata," he said, referring to the Hyuga who only responded with a smile and a faint, arigato, once more. Tucci just set 1 bowl before each of them, taking the coupons from the teen's hand and stuffing them in one of his pockets. He smiled widely at them. "Okay, so I'm sorry to bother you too, but you'll have to eat up a little fast. I'm closing up for tonight in a few," and with that, the old man went to the back of the store, probably to prepare for closing the structure down for the night. "Well, itadakimasu," he exclaimed happily as he immediately slurped down most of his bowl in one gulp. The girl next to him just smiled at his antics before whispering a thanking of her own and starting to eat up. She was so tired from all that searching, yet the bare thought of the subject was enough to sour her mood. It was all fun and happiness when she forgot about her problems and just was with him, and then it would be ruined by her damn mind and its pessimistic nature. Why couldn't she just see the bright side for a while? Just enjoy the moment, enjoy his presence. A sad smile graced her lips, as long as it lasted, a phrase suiting all fairy tales. The teen beside her seemed happy at the moment, content at slurping down the remains of his food. Strangely enough, when he was done, neither did he push her to eat faster nor did he volunteer to finish it up for her. He just waited there, patience in his posture and maybe even eagerness. He seemed anxious about something. When she too was done, she thanked him for waiting her kind nature in contradiction with her shy side. No, she didn't want to be shy, she would not be shy, not now that she was losing everything. Not now that her dreams were coming down and crushed on the ground like water falling from a waterfall. She would stand against her very nature, if only to be there and enjoy every moment. As he walked her back home, for it was quite late already, he finally popped the question she had been expecting him to say. So, found anything? Simple as this phrase was, she understood perfectly what he meant. No, there's no window for females to escape this, she just sighed, a small side of herself irritated at such. Females having no say whatsoever. Just who the hell thought up this freaking tradition? Naruto nearly yelled in his own frustration. But he calmed himself down as they continued their casual stroll along the empty road, the streetlights illuminating their figures as they walked by. Why did he care that much anyway? It was probably because she was a friend, and he hated seeing friends suffer. And he knew all too well that this marriage was the last thing she wanted. And then they talked to you about free will. He shouldn't care that much, it was too much for his own good. What if unexpected things happened? What if it just didn't roll out well? Would there be deaths? Would there be blood? He didn't want to think of the consequences of his actions, not yet. For now, he had only one purpose. And that was, to save her. And he would do anything. No friend of his would succumb to a fate bestowed on him because of others. He simply wouldn't. He informed her on his own search, which wasn't much more fruitful, to say the least. The option of killing one of the individuals was of course discarded and not even mentioned. They both knew each other well enough to know what the other's opinion would be on the matter anyway. So there they were, the Hyuga Manor before them as their footsteps came to a halt, both being silent for nearly a minute. Naruto just looked at her form as she opened the door, polished wood and white walls visible inside. She turned to look at him, a smile on her face. Naruto's mind was too preoccupied with the circumstances that were taking place in their lives right now to really register what happened next. The girl just stepped forth to him once more, leaning in as she gave him a kiss on the cheek. Arigato. Naruto-kun. Arigato for everything, she whispered in her always so soft tone as she stepped back in the compound once more, ink blue hair and lavender moons accompanied by a smile, the last thing he saw of her. He just raised a hand at the offended area, it was still warm, he traced his finger over it and then turned around, his mind in a haze as he walked towards the Godime's home. He was sure he was going to have weird dreams tonight, to say the least. The offender of the particular action though was having a hand over her heart, glad that it hadn't broken free from her chest yet. She felt it skip a beat when she leaned in and kissed him, her whole body was moving on its own accord, leaving the mind to face the consequences of its actions after the door closed. She let out a shaky sigh as she put her heart under control, moving on towards her room to sleep. She suddenly just felt so tired. What was she doing really? What with all these happy thoughts and rising hopes? She was just prolonging something that in the end would pain her even more, for the tighter a bond is, the tougher to endure the pain is when it's severed. No, she didn't want this bond severed, she didn't want it to fade away. She wanted with all her heart to keep it alive, to keep it tight and strong. But, how was she supposed to do that? How was she supposed to do it when she was going to get married to someone else? She sighed once more as she changed into her nightgown and then plopped under her covers, letting the smooth material offer the warmth his body wasn't there to give now, wasn't now and probably wouldn't ever be. A crystal tear found its way down her pale cheek as sleep overtook her, a tear, for a dream that was shattering under the iron grip of traditions. XXXXX. It didn't mean anything, did it? She was just a friend showing her gratitude for his actions, yeah, that was most likely it. He miraculously found himself in his bed, not even realizing when or how it happened. His mind contemplated a little more on that warmness, on the feeling that roamed inside, before itself fell back in the world of dreams. XXXXX. You do know that what we do is dangerous at some scale, don't you? The Hokage asked the shadowy figure before her, the slight light of the candle on her desk only able to reveal his outline. The Godem wanted it that way. What they were doing wasn't for the ears of a commoner or anyone else for that matter. It may be so, but it is the only test I found fit for both of them to prove themselves ready. Plus, the side effect this operation ought to have is anything but negative for both of us and the individuals altogether, is it not? The figure smiled slightly for a second under the shadows before the emotion vanished. The Hokage sighed as she let her gaze fall to the ground for a second, contemplating if what they were doing really could come out right. There were so many things that could go wrong, so many loose ends that were impossible to check, outside threats that loomed beyond their sight. But the other occupant of the room was right. If there was any way to test if they were ready, this was the best. Yet again, if they failed, the outcome might as well be disastrous. Things would get really complicated and the poor kids would never be the same. Win-win situations didn't always come out as one would expect them. All she could do right now was hope for the best. And plan for the worst. She turned around along with her chair, gazing upon the dawn that was impeding in the horizon, the first light of the morning sun piercing through the darkness of the night. And she had yet to get some sleep. Some strong sake was recommended on such situations. She let one more glance befall upon the dawning sky before she turned around and along with the figures started heading towards their respective homes. She let her hopes rest upon the sky, for there was where the future of Konoha lied, for better or for worst. Into the wide blue yonder. Dreaming, the shadows of the forest surrounded him. He stood in the middle of the clearing, two figures accompanying his form. He couldn't quite make out who they were in the thick darkness of the night. He tried to walk closer to see, but to no avail. He felt his feet rooted to the ground. He kept staring at the figures, hoping his vision could adjust and he could see. In the end, the figures remained in shadow. After what seemed an eternity, many other figures started coming from the forest, really fast for civilian standards. Ninjas, he thought as said shinobi approached the two mysterious figures. They too were nothing but shadows to him. He then noticed that the two figures in the middle were a male and a female, the first taller than the later. The man was behind the female probably begging for his life, if his kneeling position and clapped hands were any indication. The female seemed to stand startled. He couldn't see her eyes but somehow, he knew that they were full of fear. This female seemed to be a ninja as well. He couldn't make out any forehead protector indicating her village, but he just knew it. Before the girl could slip into a fighting stance though, the man behind her pushed her towards the other ninjas and started running, probably for his life. Before he could flee for more than a few meters, one of the ninjas stopped him and knocked him out, or killed him. He couldn't make out if he was dead or unconscious from this far. He turned his eyes to the girl once more. Now her eyes were visible, but he couldn't make out the color. He saw that she was looking towards the fallen man, tears running down her cheeks, glimmering in the light of the moon. After this, the world went dark when the man behind her stabbed her in the neck. Naruto woke up from his dream clearly startled. He sat up on his bed the moment he opened his eyes, rugged breaths accompanying. His blue orbs were wide and full of fear, still trying to take in the idea that it was all a dream. He was in his room and the light of the morning sun rolled smoothly inside from his windows, bathing the room in all its glory. Turning his head to the left, he saw the clock indicating the time. It was 8 a.m. still, he woke up late today. He sighed knowing this day would most likely be another boring waste of his life, working alongside Tsunade and the vast amounts of damn paperwork that was seemingly never ending. He stretched his arms and yawned, preparing mentally for what was most likely to come. After rubbing his eyes a little, he got up from his bed and started his everyday routines. When he was ready, dressed in his usual black and orange outfit, he went down to the kitchen to get some breakfast. Of course, he thought of ramen, but the cook had prepared some eggs and pancakes for the morning. He whined to no one for the lack of ramen in the morning table and slowly ate, thankful that at least it wasn't bad. After getting breakfast he headed for the exit and went out in the peaceful streets of the morning Konoha. The Hokage tower wasn't far away. He knocked the door of the Hokage's office, knowing that Tsunade should be here by now. No one answered so he decided to get in. Opening it slowly, he finally witnessed Tsunade doing what her old, good self usually did in a morning at the office. Sleeping, of course. He grinned as at least 20 evil thoughts of how to wake her up rolled through his mind. He wasn't in the mood though for complicated pranks, so he did the usual. Tsunade Obaa-chan. Wake up. He yelled with ferocity that could level buildings. After what seemed like seconds, a book came flying towards him from a sleeping Godem, and he barely dodged to the side before the book could hit Bull's eye. "Who the hell?" she said, still sleepy. Her tired mind then noticed Naruto standing near the door, his eyes wide in fear as he gazed at the crack on the wall the book had created and back at her. She grinned. "Oh, it's you," she nearly whispered while placing her palm on her forehead. She hated waking up like this. XXXXX. At noon, he started walking towards Ichiraku Ramen, once again a decent by his standards lunch. The conversation he had with Tsunade after the paperwork was done was still ringing in his mind. Flashback. Tsunade placed the last of the paperwork at a rather big pile of papers full of reports and mission requests. She turned to look at Naruto, who was piling some other books at her left. He grinned widely when he noticed her gaze on him. She grinned back and sighed. "Listen up, Naruto," she said in a serious tone. Naruto turned around to look at her in the eye, curiosity painting his own ones. "I've got a mission for you," she said. He now grinned even more in joy. "A mission? Woohoo," he said as he jumped from his chair and punched the air above him. "What kind of mission?" he added and looked down at her from his now heightened position. Tsunade grinned again. "An escort mission," she said. Now he wanted to start jumping around, but Tsunade interrupted his urge as she continued. "You will escort the heir of the Hyuga clan," she said. Naruto now was confused. "Wait, heir? Hyuga? Hinata?" He now grinned even more, if that was even possible. "Were to?" he asked. Tsunade's grin was still on her face. "You do know that Hinata is getting married, nay? She asked and was surprised when his grin faltered, replaced by a speck of sadness. She raised an eyebrow. "Yes," he replied as he looked away at the pile of books in front of him. Tsunade was still grinning though. "Well, you see, today she is expected to meet her husband-to-be." Naruto caught a sign of disgust in her voice. He took note of that. "Who is the heir of the Akage clan?" The Akakes don't live in Konoha even though there are shinobis. Instead, their compound is located a day's journey at the borders of Konoha and the hidden village of Rain. They are supposed to be some kind of guardians and spies. Imagine their compound as a watchpost for possible infiltration in Konoha. You are to escort Hinata there. In an hour from now, go find her at the Hyuga compound," she said, and now she was looking at him seriously in the eye. "But, why me?" he asked. Tsunade sighed. "Naruto, you are going to be the Hokage. See this mission as training," she said. Now he looked confused. He was about to ask more, but she raised her hand in motion for him to silence. "Go, Naruto. You got work to do," she said. With a, "Hi, yes," and a still sad look on his face, he took off. End flashback. Finally reaching his favorite ramen stand, he said hello to the owner, Ichiraku, and his daughter Ayame as he sat down. Ayame did notice though that his usually cheerful attitude was somehow gone, replaced by a speck of sadness accompanying his wide smile. She wanted to ask what was up, but her father stopped her with a hand on her shoulder and a shook of his head. They looked at Naruto as family, but his personal problems were his to deal with, sadly. Ayame felt better when he finally ate around 8 bowls of miso ramen. In the end, it seemed that he was his usual ramen-devouring self. Naruto rarely ate less than 4 bowls of ramen whenever he came, the circumstances where he ate less being slim to none. He paid his fee and started walking towards the Hyuga compound, as the clock at the stand indicated that it was finally time. He didn't understand though, why did this felt wrong? Why he felt that bad? Maybe it was because he knew Hinata didn't want this, that she was sad though she hid it. He couldn't stand seeing her sad. He didn't stand to see any of his friends been sad, but Hinata, it felt wrong, terribly wrong. He knew he could do something to take it away, but what? What was in him that could make her feel better? What power he held to take off the sadness? He didn't really understand, but he knew that he could do at least something to help. He was shot out of his daydreams when he noticed he had reached the gates of the Hyuga compound. He walked up to knock the door. A guard opened it. "Can I help you, young man?" he asked politely. Naruto faked a grin. He reached for his pouch. "Actually, you can," he said, and brought out a scroll, indicating a B-rank mission. The guard opened the scroll to see the briefing. "Can you go call Hinata-chan please? We don't have all day," Naruto said while crossing his arms. Impatient he was. For yet another weird reason, he wanted to get over with it. The guard raised his eyebrows. He never heard anyone call Hinata-sama with a chan. He didn't mind though, it was her decision as for who she wanted to call her what. Of course. Wait here please, he said and handed the scroll back to Naruto, who placed the respective document back in his pouch. After a seemingly endless eternity of waiting, the door finally slid open once more. He looked up to see Hinata, dressed in a formal white kimono with lavender stripes standing at the door, her hair caught in a messy bun at the back of her head, the familiar 2 strands of dark blue gracing the sides of her face. He smiled at her and she smiled back. "Well, it is time to depart, Miss Hyuga," he said and bowed while pointing with his arms to the left. She knew he made fun of formality and couldn't help but giggle at the comment. "Hi," she said, her smile never fading. He rose and now she could see the usual wide grin that run across his face, the grin that could make even the sun look dull. They started walking towards the main gates of Konoha, where was the appointed point of meeting with the other heir. There, they met with a rather strange young man with spiky red hair, if only more composed than Naruto's own blonde. It was far from hard to notice such a lad, considering his outfit. Hinata looked at his shoulder and saw the symbol of the Akage clan, figures. She stared at him with wide eyes for just a second before her face returned to the normal, calm and in Naruto's opinion, cute one. She didn't know he thought it was cute though. The man's light red hair danced with the wind, his height towering a few inches taller than her and wore a red vest with long sleeves. To tell the truth, he was all dressed in red, even his shoes were red. Naruto was twitching his eyebrows wildly. He too liked the orange color, but he wasn't devoured in it. Hinata couldn't help but smile at his somehow strange sense of fashion. It was like seeing Lee in red, without the bowl haircut and the amazingly thick eyebrows of course. Though this man's cloths looked more expensive and fashionable, to say the least. The man smiled back at her and bowed. "Miss Hyuga Hinata, I presume? My name is Kakari Akage, heir of the Akage clan. I'm pleased to see my future wife being such a marvelous young woman," he said and took her hand to kiss it lightly. She blushed a slight pink, not used to such formalities. "Nice to meet you too," she said quietly. Naruto noticed that she tried hard to smile. He too did the same thing anyway. They both had the same first impression for him. Good guy, formal, cheerful, though he had a rather awkward sense of fashion. He didn't want to imagine what would happen if he met up with Lee. "And you must be our escort? Pleased to meet you, Mr. Uzumaki," he said and raised his hand. Naruto did the same and they shook them lightly. Naruto could clearly see the man was gleaming in happiness, though he himself fought hard to keep a smile on his face. "Well, my beloved wife and our dear escort, I presume it's time for us to take our leave? I'm looking forward to plan for the wedding today. My beauty can't wait," he said, his voice serious and formal, his face happy and his eyes gleaming. Naruto raised an eyebrow. His beauty, he thought, trying to find out if he felt amused or confused. Maybe both at the same time. Hinata tried to compare his smile with Naruto's, totally different, she concluded, and she liked the last one more, much more. They walked by the road for about 30 minutes, the travel calm and, well, boring at some point. Kakari was talking to Hinata about the wedding, his own life, and to her surprise, he seemed to pay more attention to the mirror he held in his hand rather than her. Yes, another strange thing about him. He had this mirror on his hand from the moment they got out of Konoha. He even brushed his hair with his free hand now and then, and could even take a glance at her. She didn't really pay attention to what he said, her mind been focused on a certain blonde a few feet ahead of them. Naruto was not amused with said red-haired. Though he was formal and good-looking, he seemed to care about his looks more than anything else in the world. He wondered what kind of husband he could make. He laughed mentally at the idea of his children praising themselves in front of mirrors, but groaned at the idea that Hinata would be the mother. He didn't understand why he hated the idea of her getting married to someone. He knew it wasn't only about the fact that she disliked it, there was something more in there that he couldn't grasp, he couldn't quite understand. He never had this feeling before. As they kept walking, the hours seemed to pass awkwardly slow. Kakari was bragging for himself all along. Hinata told him about herself too, but to Naruto's surprise, many of the things she told were lies or twisted truth. She didn't brag. It seemed that she didn't plan telling him the truth about her own life whatsoever. He was aware however that, he himself knew much about her, even her personal life, her fears, her likes and dislikes from the conversations they had lately. When calm, she just seemed like an open book to read, a well-written book that its words were delicate and carefully accommodated throughout the story, filled with emotions that dangled between the edge of sorrow and the gleam of happiness. When night fell, they had to set camp at a rather large clearing a few meters away from the road and into the forest. The woods the only cover they had against any threat that may arise. There weren't unfortunately any post towns on the way towards the Akake compound or hidden rain. Unfortunately, for Kakari, who mumbled and complained about sleeping in a tent as they had to, and unfortunately for Naruto and Hinata who had to endure his complaints. When Naruto took off his backpack to get the supplies for the tent, he felt chakra signatures coming from the forest. One of them was strong, stronger than your average shinobi. He looked around, searching for the source of this newcomer's, one side of his mind screaming to him to grab a kunai or something, the other wishing they were just traveling ninja or something. He wished they were at least Konoha nins heading out in missions, though his hopes were crushed as one of the signatures seemed very familiar and evil. He turned to look at Hinata and Kakari. They were sitting by the fireplace, practically talking, though it was obvious that Kakari was bragging as always. He then noticed some figures shadowed in the bushes, elusive as they were to hide their presence. He pretended that he didn't see anything, though after less than a second, the figure was gone. He walked towards the couple and leaned down. "We've got company." By the tone of his voice and the look of his eyes they knew he didn't mean the good one. Kakari surprisingly nodded. "Very well then, let them come and taste the power of the Akakes," he said, nearly shouting. Naruto groaned inwardly and putted his palm on his forehead. This guy is supposed to be a ninja? God damn. Naruto had grown wary of the importance of stealth in a shinobi's life. And this man practically gave them away rather naturally, as if he wanted them to really come out and start throwing kunai and shuriken at them. He could only wish that the unknown ninjas haven't heard him. Too bad it wasn't, "Your wish is granted, day." A group of 5 men jumped out of the shadows, the light of the full moon above them the only thing giving away their appearance. They all wore black robes, as if trying to melt in the night. Naruto's eyes went wide, but he frowned as he stood up and slipped in a battle stance. Hinata and Kakari stood up as well, the latter just staying still, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes closed and a smile on his face. Hinata questioned it for a moment. Was he that powerful that he even kept his eyes closed? Only time would tell. "So, Naruto-kun, we meet again." Naruto's eyes went wide in an instant. The voice was clear and sincere, though sarcasm somehow hid behind it. Also, besides Lee, Itachi and the third at times, only one more male person called him with a kun. "Kabuto," he hissed. The man who stood in the middle of the group took a step forward and took off his cloak, revealing his rather typical purple clothing, glasses gleaming, smirk accompanying and silver hair flowing with the motion. His eyes glittered evilly behind the round objects of sight enhancement as he used a finger to raise them on his nose. His silver hair as always wrapped in a ponytail that hanged on his back, set mane glimmering in the light of the moon and fire, making his figure more intimidating. "Oh, you remember me? I'm honored," Kabuto said, sarcasm filling every word. This man had escaped the battle with Orochimaru and practically no one knew what happened to him, yet now, they seemingly had the answers. "How could I forget one of my beloved traitors?" Naruto mocked back, his voice formal, but pure sarcasm poisoned every word. It was like they were having a sarcasm debate, to see who could do it better. Naruto's eyes were fixed on the ones that resided behind the round glasses, hands twitching in anticipation of any sudden movement. Kabuto only smirked. "By the way, strange to find you here, Naruto-kun. We didn't expect you to be the escort, but what the hell? 2 birds with 1 stone," he said while grinning evilly. Naruto gasped. How did Kabuto know that there would an escort to this travel? How did he even know about this in particular? And what did he mean by 2 birds with 1 stone? "What are you talking about?" he asked, or rather hissed. It was more of a demand rather than a question. "HMPH, you have always been slow, nay, Naruto-kun? I'll tell you then, since the chances that you getting out of here are rather minimal." Orochimaru-sama had began a project about bloodline limits. "So far so good, we have gathered many bloodlines, though most of them are weak. We now seek a rather higher goal," he said and threw an evil glance at Hinata while smiling, his smile equally evil. Naruto's eyes went wide. Bloodlines, research, higher goal? Hinata. His eyes immediately frowned, his teeth grinded and his fists clenched. We had information about this, escort, and it was the perfect chance. I questioned at first the fact that there would be only one escort. This Hokage of yours thinks her ninjas are almighty, nay? I know you're pretty powerful, Naruto-kun. What a marvelous test subject a Jinchuriki would be, don't you think so? He said and smirked. He let out a chuckle while closing his eyes. Oh, this will be fun, Naruto-kun, he said while balancing his glasses on his nose again. Normally, he knew he wasn't a match for Naruto in Kyuubi form, but he intended only to wound him enough to bring him under incapacitation. I want to see you try, was Naruto's solemn reply as he prepared to launch in battle, in order to protect her. Before he moved though, a laugh could be heard from Hinata's right. They both turned to look at Kakari, who was laughing lightly, his arms still crossed on his chest and his eyes still closed. Kabuto's group looked at him too. And you, I presume? Are? He said, his face serious now. Oh, you don't know? Very well then, my dear opponent. I am Kakari Akake, heir of the mighty Akake clan. Tremble before my beauty and bow to my superiority, he said while brushing his hair with one hand, the other resting on his thigh. Kabuto, along with everyone else in the area, was twitching his eyebrows wildly. As far as he could tell, the Akakes were just a border watch clan. Noble they were indeed, but there was nothing special about them except the fact that their fire jutsu specialize was second only to the Uchihas. He grinned evilly, wanting to play a little with the fool that bragged so much about him and his clan. Oh, forgive me, your highness, but I need to take that beautiful lady over there with me, he said, fighting hard not to chuckle at the sarcasm of his own words. Kakari stepped right in front of Hinata, his hands at his sides, his smile never fading. Don't worry, my beloved, this lower human will not touch you. For I am here, and the might of the Akake clan will prevail, he said, his face still painted with that smile, his eyes never leaving the group of ninjas ahead. So, I presume we will have to do it the hard way, your highness? Kabuto said, hardly holding from bursting out laughing at the last words. Oh, it's truly fun. Let's see the so-called might of the Akakes, shall we? He said and began chuckling. His men burst out laughing, not able to hold it anymore. It was just so ridiculous, and Hinata was red from embarrassment that she even knew this man. Naruto though chuckled himself silently from behind. He too wanted to see what this man was capable of, though he didn't expect much. Fools, you challenged my wrath and now you will perish, Kakari said, his face frowning. He then slowly made a sequence of hand seals. All the individuals were more than intrigued to find out if the sequence was long or if he was terribly slow. He then finished the seals and inhaled a good amount of air. Kaden. Dragon Fire no Jutsu, he exclaimed, and at his exhalation, a large, wide flame was shot towards them. The ninjas just jumped out of the way. In the meantime, when the jutsu was over, Kakari was panting. Not much, but he was panting. Naruto and Hinata were both shocked. Kabuto and his men were completely disappointed. He had only done one jutsu, and he was panting. Okay, the jutsu needed some chakra to perform, but panting? Come on, who the hell has that low amount of chakra? I see you managed to dodge it. I'm honored that you will be a worthy opponent, Kakari exclaimed, not noticing the humility of his strength. Everyone's sweat dropped at his comment. Who the hell does he think he is? One of the men whispered so only their group could listen. Naruto turned to Hinata to see that she was looking at Kakari. Her expression was rather sad. She pitied him for his insolence and weakness, it seemed. Surprisingly, everyone had the same thought. This fool is a shinobi? Hinata turned to look at Naruto and blushed when she noticed that he was looking at her. He smiled back. Blushing was so common of her. He could hardly imagine a not blushing Hinata. He then shook his head, showing her his disappointment for Kakari. He believed that at least, this man had some honor. Let's get over with it. I don't like the idea of sitting here hearing you bragging all day, Kabuto commented, setting his glasses straight one more time. He rushed towards Kakari and launched a heavy kick to the head. Kakari only dodged with a duck as he made a low roundhouse kick to sweep the offender off his legs. Kabuto jumped to dodge the attack and prepared his chakra scraper, hands surrounded by an intense blue glow. Kakari did his best to dodge as strike came after strike. Despite his lack in chakra reserves, the man was pretty agile. He made a few back flips, disengaging from Kabuto and hiding behind Hinata. Naruto stared wide-eyed at what Kakari was doing. He was just startled. "No, please. Don't. My beautiful face. My excellent hair. My perfect cloths. Spare me, spare me. Here, take her. I don't care. Just spare me," he shouted, begging for his life as he pushed Hinata towards them. She too was completely taken off guard at what he said. He tried to run off, but a punch in the face threw him right in the ground. Kakari raised his eyes to see who was the offender of his beauty. Naruto couldn't believe his ears. This pathetic coward was supposed to be a ninja. And right now, he gave up everything, betrayed his future wife, and begged for his life. A shinobi that didn't obey the rules and his duty was crap, but a shinobi that betrayed his comrades and allies due to selfishness was even worse crap. Even though these words could barely describe the attitude of said man. He preferred to save his beautiful face and let Hinata die. He couldn't stand such a coward. He did the only thing reasonable to save Kakari's last specks of honor. Not that he deserved it though. "What are you doing? You are supposed to protect me," Kakari shouted at his attacker. Naruto frowned even more. This man probably had no honor to begin with. Protect you? Such a selfish, arrogant and weak fool doesn't deserve to even exist. Fate-less coward. You prefer to leave Hinata die so you can save your sorry ass. A great husband you could make. I don't understand how the hell you even became a shinobi. A rookie genin can easily beat you senseless. He practically spat, hands twitching to launch more punches. It was hard to restrain himself from spitting on the weakling that lied next to him. "I'm surprised though, that you are even awake right now. If you have any self-esteem at all, stand and fight," he shouted. "No, I don't want to die. I'm too beautiful to die." Naruto now frowned even more. This man, how can someone be so selfish? At that moment, he wanted to take out a kunai and stab him in the head, if only to end his misery. But suddenly he felt a warm, gentle hand on his shoulder. And as if by magic, the rage that was building inside suddenly subsided, fell back, vanished, if only for a moment. He turned his head to see Hinata shook her own. "He's not worth it," she whispered so only he could hear her. He nodded and grabbed Kakari by the cloths to raise him to eye level. "Thank her later for saving your pathetic life for now," he said and punched him hard on the head, throwing him unconscious. Well, if you're done with that fool, could we get to work, Naruto-kun?" Kabuto asked from behind. He too along with his men were watching the scene, enjoying that fools beat up. Naruto's answer was a glare that, if human eyes could really kill, Kabuto would be mutilated. "So Dasuka, I see. Let's begin then." And with that, he and his men were upon them. Both shinobi of the leaf fell in their respective fighting stances, Hinata in her Jukin 1 and Naruto in an awkward taijutsu 1, hands before him and slowly jumping from one leg to the other, moving non-stop as each motion of his muscles prepared for a strike. All four of the offenders took out a kunai, Kabuto preparing his chakra scraper yet again. The traitor of the leaf engaged Naruto in combat while the others took on Hinata, said girl narrowing her eyes as the Byakugan flared into action. Naruto kept dodging strike after strike, each one answered by one of his own. If Kabuto would throw a left punch, he would title his body to the left, avoiding the attack and hitting the man straight in the stomach or chest. He relied only in quick and evasive counterattacks for now. Kabuto braced himself once more. There, Naruto saw an opening. Quickly attacking, he feigned a strike to the head with his front arm. As expected, Kabuto tried to dodge, only to have Naruto spun in blinding speed and give him a backhand in the face with his other hand. The purple-clad man faltered. But Naruto was relentless as he quickly did a low roundhouse kick, taking the man off his feet and then used both hands as leverage with his legs shooting out, kicking the still falling man away. He stood up once more, seeing as Kabuto quickly recuperated and stood up himself, coughing a little at the force of the dual kick. What was this stance, this technique, so unfamiliar? The whole movement seemed to loose and disorientated, yet reflexives and speed accompanied by technique could easily overpower brutal strength. No matter how strong Kabuto's punches or kicks were, they couldn't do much since the target was elusive enough to avoid and counterattack. He wouldn't let this slide so easily, not like this. He charged in again, his eyes full of controlled and purposed anger as he charged again, hands glowing. Hinata in the meantime used yet another, Hakesho Kaden, to repel an incoming shower of flying weaponry, all of them repelled. The velocity of her ultimate defense even took down two of the poor fools that dared stay close. The remaining duo of the group nodded to each other as they prepared hand seals. Hinata's eyes narrowed. She herself had quite the poor arsenal in jutsus, being more dependent on her family's taijutsu for combat. She didn't have time to waste, she didn't have time to let them finish their techniques. She rushed forward towards one of them. Kaden. Fenikusu Kaki, fire release. Phoenix fire. Both men exclaimed as an endless shower of small fireballs launched towards the Hyuga heiress. She could see that they had purposely lowered the power of the technique, not as much chakra given in it. They didn't want to kill her, or at least they didn't want to destroy her face. A wild dance began as she moved with amazing speed throughout the balls, avoiding most of them by an inch as her dress got scorches at plenty of areas, thankfully not enough though to catch fire. When the technique ended, the Hyuga finally released the breath she was holding and took a new one, this time one of her opponents quite close. The man took out a kunai. And that was the last thing he did as she rushed forward, a Jukin strike straight in his chest. Needless to say, the man only groaned before hitting the dirt, dead. Then her side ached, as a kick landed on her side, sending her flying and finally crushing on the dirt, her shout of pain not going unnoticed by the blonde who still engaged against Kabuto. "Little bitch," the man hissed as he let one last glance fall to his fallen comrade before preparing two kunai in each hand, focused on finishing the girl off right here and now and take her eyes. Most preferable, since she would be less kicking if she was dead. She slowly sat up, her side aching from the pain as the shock of the strike passed and the pain rolled in, even though it was getting duller already. Her Byakugan noticed the man nearing. She quickly spun around, a kick finding its way in the man's chest, sending him back a few meters. He quickly recuperated though as he glared at her, rushing in quickly. Hinata dodged one strike after the other as each of them came dangerously close and finding its mark. This one was practically good in close-range combat. Sidestepping one more strike, she went in for the kill, grabbing the stretched limb with one hand, crushing it in a wave of chakra as the open palm of her other hand found its way to the man's chest. The power shot out coursing through him and expelling on the other side. He coughed up blood before starting to fall. "Jukin bitches. Curse the mushroom." And with that he was dead, even though his last words were quite weird. She shook it off though, gazing back at the blonde and his fight, ready to rush in and help him. But before she could get any closer, Kabuto somehow managed to send one of the multiple Narutos that were fighting him away in the sky, said blonde crushing in a tree and practically destroying it as his copies poofed into smoke. The traitor then smirked, as his eyes focused on the final target. "Now my lady, the easy or the hard way?" he said, turning to Hinata. Her slip into Jukin stance was her answer. His smirk only widened. "Good," he stated and he was off. Hinata barely had time to avoid his strikes. Even with her Byakugan, he was pretty fast. He managed to land a few strikes since she was already pretty winded from fighting 4 shinobi together nearly a minute prior, but thankfully said hits were not chakra scrapers. She was needed alive, after all. She kept launching palm strikes which he dodged for he knew even one hit could mean the end. Finally, after several minutes of exchanging taijutsu strikes, Kabuto hit her in the chest, making her fall back and crush on a tree. He walked near her and prepared for a final blow to throw her unconscious. Little did he know though, until the last second, that an ominous chakra was raging behind him. Naruto once more felt sore from Kabuto's strike. He had applied much chakra in that kick, thus making it 10 or more times more painful. His vision was quite blurry at the moment though he could make out Hinata fighting Kabuto. His eyes suddenly went wide, his heart started beating like crazy, fear overwhelmed his senses. He knew Hinata wasn't a match for the traitor. He was toying with her and that made him even madder. Something inside him though, was tranquil instead of raging. He felt power overcoming him, he felt every muscle in his body going wild. But why? He knew it was the Kyuubi chakra, but usually this power was unleashed when he was terribly angry, but now, he felt a sense of tranquility overwhelming him. He knew something was amiss. But when he saw Hinata getting pummeled on a tree, his heart nearly stopped. He couldn't sit and wonder why his powers were rising now. He had to stop him, at all costs. Kabuto turned around to see Naruto rushing towards him. He knew it had to do something with the Kyuubi, since his eyes were red and he had fangs and claws, but he was glad that the cloak of the fox hadn't developed yet. He was holding back the Kyuubi's power on purpose. He knew he did it for the girl, for if he unleashed the full of it, it would be devastating. He barely had a second to dodge a mighty punch in the chest. A split second after he missed, Naruto turned around to deliver a round kick at Kabuto's sides. He, not able to dodge, raised his hands in defense. He took the kick and was launched several meters away, hitting a tree and breaking it in two. But the blonde wasn't satisfied. His red eyes lusted for more. He wanted that glass fool to take what he deserved. Kabuto was sore. The kick was filled with so much demonic chakra. He tried to heal himself but to no avail. Naruto was already above him, Rasengan in hand. "It is over, Glass Boy," he said with a smirk and rammed the Rasengan in Kabuto's chest. He didn't scream, for a smirk could be seen on his face before the pain overwhelmed him and his eyes went wide. After that, the world darkened. Hinata just stared in awe. Naruto's power was something extraordinary. She didn't understand how he became so powerful suddenly. She wanted to ask him, but she felt sore from the battle, her senses dulled at the moment. She had thankfully healed most small injuries already, though with a few basic healing ninjutsus, in order to avoid infection. While she stared at his form before the now dead medic Nin, he alleviated his gaze from the corpse to look at her. She caught sight of a color of demonic red in his eyes, the red orbs filled with concern. After a split second, the red was replaced with the usual cerulean she knew all too well. He walked up to her. "Daijobu Desuka, are you okay?" he asked gently as he placed a palm on her shoulder. She smiled and blushed when she realized he was so close again. She nodded, though her smile was all he needed for an answer. "Let's go back then," he said. She tried to stand but she realized her legs couldn't take her body weight, probably a side effect of Kabuto's enhanced strike before. Naruto-kun, I can't move," she said, the usual stutter returning even lightly. He grinned at this. "No problem," he said and circled his arms around her waist and under her knees to pick her up. She blushed heavily at this, and he noticed it for her body went stiff. He wondered if he did the right thing or if she didn't want to, but he knew it was okay when her body relaxed after a second. He was surprised at how light she was. She was quite smaller than him, yes, but then again, he didn't hold girls in his arms every day. She felt warm in there, in his hands. His body radiated warmth no other could give. She closed her eyes and rested her head on his chest as he walked towards their encampment. Her hands warped on his jacket ever so lightly, as if wanting to absorb more, and the blonde noticed it. Why was she doing that? Would every girl do that? Was he that comfortable? These thoughts raced in his mind, but one overwhelmed them all when he looked at her face. She was asleep, her face radiating an aura that told you that she was in heaven. Her smile also helped in it, that smile he could never forget and he rarely saw. He knew for sure she was asleep when her grip on his jacket loosened completely. He smiled again. He looked down at her face once more, adoring the paleness of her skin against the similarly colored light of the moon. She could be so peaceful when she was sleeping. His smile widened when she moaned lightly. His dream, or nightmare, had come true. He saw this fight in his dream, not the individuals, but he saw the fight. He knew his dream had somehow come true when Kakari pushed Hinata over to the enemy and tried to run for his life, though in said imaginary occasion, there was someone else who stopped him. Not that it mattered though, this coward got what he deserved. And that clearly wasn't Hinata. Kakari had just woken up a few minutes before the battle ended. And he had witnessed what happened. The rage in Naruto's red eyes, the murderous intent they radiated against Kabuto. He saw what the now dead traitor did to Hinata, but he could care less. His first thought was to run away and save himself when he saw Hinata fall. But his legs were so sore he could barely move, as he had probably hit a nerve when he had crushed on the dirt. He saw Naruto approaching with a smiling Hinata in his arms. What was this mockery? This monster held his future wife in his hands. Naruto approached the campfire they had set before all these started, the corpses of their opponents at the other side of the clearing. Unfortunately, he hadn't set up a tent or anything yet. All they had was a small campfire. He walked up to a tree and gently leaned Hinata on it. He could have sworn he saw disappointment covering her face for a second when he detached her from him. He too, though, felt somehow cold without her presence. He thought it must have been the night temperature and his tiredness, of course. What else could it be anyway? He took a rather big blanket from his backpack and covered her dreaming form with it, hoping that at least it could keep her warm. Needless to say, her dress was ruined from combat as well as the bun, which had lessened, allowing her long hair to fall, messily covering shoulders and back, the majestic ink blue color a contradiction to her pale skin. He looked at her now tranquil face while she was sleeping, breathing slowly. He couldn't help but smile. Kakari finally found enough power in him to walk. He stood up and with slow steps approached the two. Hinata laying on a tree with a certain blonde kneeling beside her, his mind drifted off. Bah, what have you done? You took away my honor of defeating these fools. Now step back. I need to see my wife. I said step back, you monster, or I'll— He didn't finish his sentence for Naruto gave him a hard punch in the face. What the hell are you doing? Kakari shouted. Naruto was pissed, to say the least. This fool had the guts to speak after what he had done. He demanded respect? Serving you as you deserve, he said, faking formality. What are you talking about? I am the heir of the Akake clan. I demand for you to bow. He shouted and stood up. Bow to me and ask for forgiveness, he stated. Oh, Naruto now wanted nothing in the world than to take a kunai and rip all of Kakari's internal world apart. You are so fucking lucky that Hinata-chan didn't allow me to kill you. You are not worth the energy anyway. He hissed, fighting hard the urge to spit on him. Who was this spoiled brat to demand respect? The heir of the mighty Akake clan? The title was worth nothing as long as the person bearing it was less than dirt worthy. He couldn't believe such people even existed, yet there he stood, the most selfish and naive human being, who dared to even call himself a shinobi. He was around his age, yes, but he was like a 5-year-old spoiled brat in the body of a teenager. See? She doesn't hate me. She will be my wife, he shouted back. It took every speck of Naruto's self-control to not rip him apart, for Hinata's sake. You arrogant bastard, how dare you even say that? What kind of husband will you make when you care more for your fucking hair than her? True, you don't know her much, but she had been kind to you. She had endured this bragging shit of yours, and what does she get from her beloved husband-to-be? No, please, don't. My beautiful face, my excellent hair, my perfect cloths. Spare me, spare me. Here, take her. I don't care, just spare me. Even if she is somehow a stranger, it's your freaking duty as a shinobi to protect her. You are not worth shit. Not you, nor that clan of yours. Think you're all high and mighty because you come from a noble family? A shinobi who betrays his duty and the rules is shit, but a shinobi who betrays his fellow ninjas, his comrades, to save his sorry ass is even worse shit. You don't deserve her, Naruto said, his speech having rather stunned the shinobi joke in front of him. She will be my wife. I do not care what you monster think. Kakari shouted back again. Naruto now stood up and looked Kakari in the eye. The only monster I see here is you, he said, countering his words. Step aside. We need to reach the compound soon. Kakari stated. Oh, that was it. Naruto couldn't hold himself anymore. His eyes went a blood red, his pupils slit. He still contained his power though, for only his eyes changed. Not, we. You are leaving. Now, Naruto stated. Kakari was startled. The killing intent he saw before was there again. But, he tried to protest. A red Rasengan was now forming in Naruto's hand. Leave, now, he repeated. This time Kakari seemed to get the message. He turned around with a frown and by crossing his arms over his chest, he walked quickly away. With that Naruto calmed down, and when the arrogant fool was out of sight, he turned around to see a shivering Hinata lying beside him. He didn't understand why she shivered. She should be warm with that blanket, right? Her face was frowning as if she suffered, and he didn't like that one bit. Without knowing anything else to do, he leaned down next to her and warped his arms around her, holding her tightly on him. Her arms on his chest and her head at the crook of his neck, her silky hair touching his chin, that aroma of lavender and roses back yet again. He was surprised at how warm she was yet again, how comfortable it was to just sit there. He could get used to this. No, wait, he didn't want to. He wanted every time to be like this. He was pleased to see that the shiver had stopped. He felt even better when he heard her soft moan. He didn't know why. He had held girls before, but this was different. It felt so warm. He would smile widely if he could see the smile that formed on her face when she had leaned her head into him even more, letting her whole weight free on his body, but he didn't see it, for he had fallen asleep in the emerald dream. She could feel his warmth all over her body. She felt like it was heaven. She moaned softly while being in his arms, having not noticed that he heard it. She was a little disappointed when he laid her down, but felt a little better when he covered her in a blanket. She was nearly asleep, but she was awoken by Kakari's shouts. She didn't move though. Xianlu opened her eyes slightly in order to observe. She heard every word they exchanged. She too wanted so badly to get up and beat Kakari senseless to the ground, but she didn't react. She heard Naruto talking again. She felt so happy that he really did mention that he wouldn't kill him, for she asked him not to. He did it for her, that's what mattered. She felt even better with the little speech counter on Kakari's selfish words. She observed silently at Kakari and questioned herself as to why his eyes went wide in fear after Naruto stood up. Maybe he feared him so much? She knew he was a coward. But then, she saw the red Rasengan in Naruto's hand. She thought the Rasengan was blue. She shook it off, thinking it must have been her sleepiness, as for the sphere of destruction disappeared after a few seconds, and so, to her relief, did Kakari. She felt happy that Naruto supported her so much. Now she had a very good reason to not marry that bastard. She saw him turning to look at her, and she looked right into his blue eyes through her eyelids. She then closed her lavender pools shut and started shivering from nervousness, hoping he didn't know she was awake the whole time. She was completely taken off guard when he leaned down, got under the blanket and held her close. She didn't mind though, as long as he held her. She smiled as the warmth of his body returned and moaned softly. It was like a dream coming true. A final thought raced through her mind. There truly was truth in dreams, and the evidence was right there. She was asleep, in his arms. She woke up the next morning, the sun having risen slightly above the trees of the forest. She then looked around to see where she was. It felt so warm and comfortable. She then noticed she was in Naruto's lap. For a moment, she thought this was a dream, and couldn't resist but to take advantage of it. She raised her head slowly and kissed him on the cheek. She smiled when she saw him grin happily. She rested her head again at the crook of his neck and closed her eyes. The light breeze of the morning was blowing with harmony on them. She felt so calm. Suddenly she heard a slight yawn. She realized he had woken up. "Nay, Hinata-chan, rise and shine," he said while rubbing her back gently. She looked up to see his smiling face and blushed a bright red, realizing this wasn't a dream. She felt embarrassed but happy too. He smiled even more. As he gently lifted her from him and stood up, he was completely surprised that it felt so cold, as if all the warmness of the world had faded. Hinata felt the same. His eyes went wide for a second, realizing how cold it was without her. But he thought it was just the morning breeze, but, for once in his life, he knew his mind was talking bullshit. "Come on, Hinata-chan, we need to go back to Konohane?" he said and offered his hand to help her stand up. She accepted it with a blush and a smile. He accidentally, though, pushed her on him when he pulled her up, making her head fall on his chest along with her hands. They both blushed a bright red. Naruto broke away. Let's pack up. We've got a long way," he said nervously and went on to pack their belongings. Hinata though stood there stunned. Was it a blush she saw on his face? No, she couldn't believe he would blush, not for her at least. After the packing was done and they were on their way back to Konoha, there was an awkward silence between them. They just stared to the ground most of the time, though they could steal glances on each other now and then. Of course, they didn't know. Then Naruto broke the silence at last, wanting to express that thought that roamed in his mind. "Nay, Hinata-chan," he began to get her attention. She turned to look at him, his face serious and sad at the same time. "Hi, Naruto-kun?" she asked in her always soft and gentle voice, which to his surprise, he found it adorable. It was so her. Nothing personal or anything, but, are you still going to marry that fool?" he said while rubbing the back of his head and looking straight ahead. She was surprised by the question and her eyes were wide. She shook her head lightly and he saw it with the corner of his eye. A weight was lifted from his heart that moment, and he turned to look at her beautiful, pale face. He was somehow terrorized by his own thoughts. Why did they keep coming up like this? He couldn't deny it forever, something was amiss. Anyway, he didn't care. He kind of liked it. No one made him feel that way before, not even Sakura. I don't think so, Naruto-kun. This man, he doesn't deserve to even be a ninja, she said, her voice serious and surprisingly cold at the recall of his image in her mind. Naruto knew she didn't like him one bit, and who could blame her? The man would easily leave her to save his ass on the very first difficult situation on a mission. For they would do missions together, for they were ninjas who are married, though this couldn't possibly happen now, would it? Naruto's weight on his heart was lifted by a good deal. He smiled at her, which made her blush and smile back. How he loved this smile. It was so real, so sincere, so hers. Nay, Hinata, want to hear something about Ero Sennin, Jiraiya, his former teacher and super first-class pervert? He asked. She knew his mood was lifted by a good amount and she was happy for it. Though she knew most stories about Jiraiya were mostly about perverted acts, she was eager to hear his voice. They were both laughing at the stories Naruto said. Jiraiya once had returned with a woman on his back that didn't want to get off him no matter what he did. She even proposed him to marriage, and that freaked the Sannin so much that Naruto could have sworn he hadn't seen Jiraiya run like this all his life. She laughed for it was funny, and he laughed because she found it funny. He always loved to see her smile. He didn't understand why, he wondered about it all the time though. What was happening? He had never felt like this. Even with Sakura, and tea is a pain to miss. After a few more hours of walking and laughing and talking, they reached Konoha. The guards questioned for a second why they were here so early. Nearly everyone knew about the planned wedding of the Hyuga heiress. Then the guard remembered something before they could leave. Wait. They both turned around to look at the guard who had extended his hand in motion for them to stop. Tsunade-sama wanted us to tell you that she requires your presence as soon as you return. For some reason, she knew you would come early. You were supposed to be off for 2 more days, he said, but shrugged his shoulders and sat back on his chair reading some reports. They both looked at each other and nodded. Naruto wasn't in the least surprised to see Tsunade sleeping. He was surprised with himself that he didn't want to yell. Something was holding him back, and that something simply stood next to him with its pale lavender eyes wide open and looking at the Hokage. Don't worry. Ka-san, mother, is always like that, he said, bewildered that he for once called someone mother. Hinata was surprised too. She was about to ask, but he placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll tell you later. She knew he was to become the Hokage. He had told her when they went to his apartment, but he hadn't told anyone about anything like calling Tsunade mother. She shrugged it off for the moment, she could ask him later. Naruto went closer and stood before her desk. Hinata stood next to him. He told her to duck, and after giving him a questioning look, she did. He then started poking Tsunade and saying, Tsunade. Tsunade Oba-chan, wake up. He said and repeated it several times. He then saw Tsunade's hand flinch and he immediately ducked. After a second, a book was flying towards the door. Naruto, you baka, idiot. Her voice trailed off when she saw no one was there. She then gasped when Naruto appeared across her desk, a wide grin on his face. After a second, Hinata rose too. Tsunade grinned. Oh, so you two are back? Good. Naruto now looked at her confused, and so did Hinata. Please take a sit, she said, pointing with her hand the 2 seats across her desk. They both stared at her at first, but then started looking between them and the Hokage. Tsunade grinned. What's up with Kakari? Everything went good, right? She asked, an evil grin on her face. Naruto frowned immediately at the sound of his name. That fateless coward must have reached his compound by now, or he's dead somewhere in the forest, probably killed by a cat or something. Not that I care anyway. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Naruto, not care? Something was amiss. What happened out there, Naruto? She asked politely. He looked at Hinata, who nodded, and he nodded back, throwing her a smile which made her blush. He started explaining the whole situation, with Hinata filling some blanks in his memory. Kakari's bragging all the way till they settled for the night, Kabuto's attack, Kakari's selfishness and false self-esteem reaching inhuman levels, the fight, and finally, Kakari's rather unique scolding. Tsunade felt terribly sick. How could the Hyugas get their heiress to marry such a fool? No, fool is only an understatement. Such a monster. He could have Hinata killed at the very first difficult situation. But Naruto was there. He cared for her a lot. She knew Naruto was the exact opposite of this pathetic scum and she was glad that her decisions were right. "Thank you for explaining the whole thing, Naruto, Hinata," she said, throwing glances of compassion to them both. "You prove me right this time," she said. Naruto now looked at her confused. "How so?" he asked. Hinata was wondering the same thing. Tsunade sighed. "Look, the whole marriage by letter thing is rather disgusting to me. When I learned that Hinata was going to be married by force, I had to do something. I couldn't persuade your father to stop it, since he wanted it too it seems, but at least, I looked to find more about the man you would take," she said. Now Hinata looked at her with hope. Maybe now she could face her father and tell him the whole thing. Tell him that she won't get married with just anyone. "Your tale proves my information true. Kakari is an extremely spoiled man. He was raised in the opposite way any shinobi would. He ate with golden spoons and lived without even knowing the feeling of emotional or even physical pain. He never moved a finger to gain respect. He never trained and somehow, Kami-sama, God, only knows how, he became a ninja. I was rather disgusted. He loved himself more than anything in the world." At these words, Naruto remembered Gaara. This one though, was raised in the exact opposite way. Gaara loved himself only, but he was a powerful cold-blooded killer before Naruto saved him from the darkness of his own mind. "Don't ask how, big story it is. I knew all this but I didn't tell a thing to Hiyashi. I knew he already knew all this shit and yet, for the good and greatness of his clan, he let you marry such a fool. Even Naruto is a far better choice if you ask me or anyone else." At this, they both blushed a shade of red. Surprisingly enough, Naruto didn't even start protesting. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. That dense baka finally got an idea, only time will tell though. "I'm proud of you, Naruto," she thought to herself while smiling. "Anyway, the reason I sent Naruto specifically is that I know his passion to protect his friends. I hoped some would rub off on this fool. But from what you told me, it hasn't. Hinata, your father doesn't know anything about this. You must tell him though that you deny the marriage. I can't have one of my best shinobis to court with such a worthless scum. Anyway, that was all I had to say. Off you go," she said and waved a hand in motion for them to go. They both nodded after looking at each other and walked out of the room. Tsunade sighed again. "Don't do anything stupid, Naruto," she thought. It was getting dark now. The evening sun had began to falter behind forests of Konoha. Naruto then realized he was starved. He looked at Hinata who had the same expression on her face. He smiled. "Hinata-chan, want to come with me for ramen?" he asked. She was taken aback for a second. Was he asking her on a date? No, he just wanted her to come with him for dinner, didn't he? She just stared at him for a minute, blushing as always of course. He noticed the silence though. "It's okay if you don't want to come," he said while looking down and trailing off in his last words. She shook her head and smiled. "I'd love to, Naruto-kun," she said softly and his face immediately brightened. But of all pains, the greatest pain. A few minutes later, they reached Ichiraku ramen stand. They both sat on a stool across the counter and ordered their preferences. Naruto ordered, to Ayame's complete horror, 2 bowls of ramen, and Hinata only 1. Ayame noticed however the nervousness between them, and caught an idea of what was going on. She smiled. Naruto had finally caught an idea. While they were eating, Naruto couldn't stand the awkward silence. He wanted answers for this strange feelings towards her, but he needed to ask in a way that wouldn't reveal him, at least not yet. "Nay, Hinata-chan," he asked while having swallowed a good deal of noodles. She turned her gaze from her half-finished bowl to look into his cerulean pools. She blushed. "Hi, Naruto-kun?" she asked gently. He made a sad smile, but his eyes were filled with happiness as if he remembered a happy memory of the past. To tell the truth, he did. The way he cheered for Hinata in the Chunin exams when they were younger, her lifting his hopes to new levels before his battle with Neji, the missions they had done together, the time they had spent together. He wanted to know how she felt, badly. She noticed the sad, yet somehow happy look on his face, and her eyes were filled with worry for a second. "You know, I like a girl," he started, and Hinata felt her heart ache. He liked a girl? Who was she? Was it her? She had to know, she hoped, she dreamed, she needed to know. And I'm just not sure how to tell her. I mean, she's beautiful and all that, kind-hearted and much more. But I don't know, how will I know she returns the feelings? He asked, looking at her now, eyes full of question. But at the moment he looked at her in the eye, she noticed something more, something he tried to hide behind the questions. She wanted to know, she needed to know. Anyo, Naruto-kun. Who is she? She asked, but he looked away as if in embarrassment. She made him uncomfortable? What for? She was his friend. Or was it? No, she needed proof. I mean, Naruto-kun, every girl needs a different approach, she said, looking down and trailing off in the last words. Naruto turned to look at her, only to see her looking at her bowl of ramen and playing with her chopsticks in the soup. How was he supposed to answer? He didn't want to tell her yet, he wasn't ready. He didn't want her to freak out or something, faint and all these things. He needed to know. He had to make a different approach. Well, let's just say that she is a close friend. She doesn't like much to be in public and she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She is comfortable enough when close to me, and he trailed off, thinking that if he continued he could reveal too much. She alleviated her gaze from the bowl to him, only to see him looking nervously at the counter. He never was so nervous before. Why was it so hard to tell her? Why was it so hard to just say he liked someone else? She opened her mouth to ask a question, but was interrupted by Ayame. So, Naruto, is this girl your girlfriend? Ayame asked teasingly and Naruto's eyes went wide. Hinata-chan? What? She's just a friend, he said, not believing even his own words. He looked down at the counter, closing his eyes. He didn't want to say this. He didn't want to. He wanted her to be more than a friend, much more. Why he hesitated? Why was he so foolish? It is to love, but love in vain. Hinata stared at him wide-eyed. Just a friend. Just a friend. Just a friend. This thought lingered and repeated in her mind for more than a minute before it could sunk in. So, she was just a friend, nothing more to him. She felt her heart hitting the ground, her world being devoured in darkness. Her dreams shuddering to pieces. If she didn't fight hard to keep the tears from falling, and if she did look at him in the eye, she could see the regret and sorrow he held for his own words. He didn't turn to look at her. He didn't want to see the reaction. Ayame in the meantime, realized what she had done. Uh-oh, she thought and turned around towards the kitchen. Hinata stood up, fighting the tears back. Naruto noticed it, and slightly turned around to look at her. She wore a sad smile on her face. He knew it was fake. So, he knew now. He knew the impact of his words, he could even grasp the inner meaning of her actions. He wanted to take them back, he wanted to right the wrong, he just needed a chance. Hinata-chan, he said with sadness. She turned away to look out at the dark streets, not wanting to meet his gaze. So, he knew about her feelings. He was just toying with her around. And now, he was just sad that he had to tell her he loved someone else. She wanted the earth to swallow her. She then felt a warm hand on her shoulder. Hinata-chan. He repeated, plea. Before he could continue, she shook her head. It's okay Naruto-kun. I know. I'll just go. Go to bed. It's getting late, she said, fighting hard to keep herself from sobbing. Was she crying? God no, he made her cry? Why? Why did she cry? He knew the words, just a friend, hit a spot, but that much? He needed to make up to it. His soul couldn't stand it. Before he could speak, she had already started walking away, and in a few seconds, she dashed away in the night. His heart ached. She was gone, gone. He didn't want to believe it. No, why? Why did it hurt so much? He had to stop this. Before thinking anything else, he dashed forward behind her. At the stand, old man Ichiraku and his daughter Ayame shook their heads, looking down in sadness. He jumped from rooftop to rooftop, scanning the area around for her. He could catch the faint smell of lavender with his Kyuubi chakra-enhanced smell. He followed the smell suit. He had to find her and talk to her. He had to right the wrong. She wanted to get away. She wanted to go somewhere and cry it all out. She wanted to vanish. She knew what she did wasn't the best right now, but she couldn't really face him right now. She had to gather the mental pieces of her heart, put them together and face him again, even if he was with someone else. Soon, her feet carried her at the Hokage monument. She sat there on the head of the fourth Hokage and looked up into the spotted night. It was beautiful. The night was filled with stars and right above Konoha hanged a full moon, bathing the village in its pale light. She felt a few more tears falling down her pale cheeks. How she wanted things to change, to have a chance. The smell was stronger now. He had reached the Hokage mountain and the smell of lavender guided him up to the monuments. There, sitting on the head of the fourth, was Hinata. He slowly approached, trying not to scare her so she couldn't run away again. His footsteps were as silent as can be. She noticed someone approaching from behind. Was it an assassin? She didn't care. Life was worthless without him. If the sorrow could be taken away by that way, so be it. She felt him coming closer and closer, slowly, painfully slow even, as if he didn't want to scare her. Finally, she heard him sit next to her. She dared to take a glance at him, and what she saw made it even more painful. But if you look back, Hinata, I'm sorry. You're not just a friend, you can't be. You're one of my best friends, and I would rather die than to see you cry, he said. She felt the sorrow, yet truth in his words. Her world seemed to have color again. Her life seemed to have meaning. So, was there a chance? Was there? She remembered the fact that he already loved someone, and her sorrow returned full force. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she said. At least, she was a good friend. And she would stay a good friend. No matter who he loved, she wanted him to be happy, even if she wasn't the cause of it. The tears were dry now. She felt much better. No matter what, she would be there for him. No matter who he loved, no matter what she was to him. Even if it hurt like hell, she wouldn't give up for him. When she was sure her tears were dry and gone, she lifted her head from her lap to look at him. He was looking up at the stars. No, I must thank you, Hinata-chan, he said, looking down again. She was confused now. Thank her for what? You always were there for me. Always listened me. You were always a good friend. I just wish you were something more. He thought the last part to himself. She felt happiness combined with the sadness in her heart. No matter who he loved, she would be there for him, always there. She would stand by his side even if he didn't love her back, his guardian angel. Her heart was aching, the weight nearly unbearable, but she had to be strong for him. She had to stand her ground. He sat there, next to her, looking at the stars with his rare tranquil expression. Now that she thought about it, she was the only one he exposed this side of himself, the calm and gentle one. To tell the truth, he never told her who the girl was. Was it she? Was she the one? She wanted to know, she had to know. Anyo. Naruto-kun. Who do you like? She asked nervously, dreading the answer. Who do I like? He asked, looking back at her and blinking a few times. He smiled, seeing the confusion and nervousness in her expression. So, there was a chance, I'll just tell you, she's an angel. He said and looked back at the stars. She blinked in confusion a few times. An angel? Was she that good? She wished she could be that person, she wished. She was still staring at him though, her expression the one of confusion and sadness. She was smiling sadly. He looked at her again, and noticed that she was still looking at him. He was lost for a few seconds in this lavender moons, and he could stare at them all day long. She blushed a slight pink, realizing she was staring, while he grinned. He titled his head towards the sky. You like it? He asked, still grinning widely. She simply smiled back, a true one this time, and nodded. He could sense her nervousness though. Something bothering you, Hinata-chan? He asked again, his voice serious but gentle. She looked up at him and thought for a second. She wanted to ask so many things. She wanted to know him better than she already did. A few images flashed in her mind. She then realized something. Actually, yes, Naruto-kun. She said. He looked at her with curiosity. When you fought Kabuto back there was something strange about your chakra, and your eyes looked different, she said softly and in a low voice. He gasped. She had to ask this? Of all things? Now what could he tell her? He didn't want to tell her about Kyuubi. It would ruin everything. Nothing, Hinata-chan, it was nothing. Maybe you needed some rest, he said sadly, but Hinata knew better. He was hiding something from her, something he didn't want her to know, didn't trust her to know. Back at the pain. It's okay. Naruto-kun, I understand, you don't trust me and, she was on the verge of tears. Naruto noticed it and immediately his heart fell. He didn't want to make her cry. Not a chance in hell. He circled his arm around her waist and held her a little closer. No, Hinata-chan. Please don't cry, it's not that I don't trust you, he said, trying to ease her. Even as she leaned and started sobbing on his shoulder, she was persistent. Then why? I am too weak to know? Am I someone, she was about to cry again. He shook his head. No, Hinata, you're not weak. I am for not being able to tell you, it's just that. You might even hate me if I told you, he said, trailing off at the last words and looked down. His sad expression couldn't go unnoticed. I won't hate you, Naruto-kun. I love you too much to hate you, she thought the last part to herself. He still looked down at the ground. Please Naruto-kun, trust me, she said softly. He looked up at her. She saw the pain and sadness in his eyes. He was afraid he would lose her, afraid she would go away, vanish, but he had to say it or else he would lose her anyway. He let out a sigh and stood up. He took a few steps forward, now a few steps away from the edge of the mountain. Hinata, he began. She was sitting a few steps behind him, staring at him with curiosity. You remember when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha? 17 years ago? He asked, his face looking forward at the village down the cliffs and not back at her. Yes, the fourth died to kill the demon, she said, her soft voice music to his ears, but the pain, he couldn't stand it, he couldn't just let her go, but then, he was already in deep shit to go back now. He sighed again. Hinata, the demon wasn't killed. He couldn't be killed, so the fourth sealed him in a baby, he said, his voice covered in sadness. Hinata now could get the idea, and even had an idea of the big picture, but she wanted him to tell it. She stood up. Naruto's heart now felt heavier. He had to finish this, otherwise he would have a heart attack. Hinata, the Kyuubi was sealed in me. I've been its carrier for 17 years. I can use its powers. Hold the demon. He trailed off in the last word and sighed. His eyes were in the merge of tears. What would she do now? She would start screaming, demanding explanations? She would run away crying? She would attack him? He heard soft footsteps behind him, and well, she did what he expected the least of all. Then you may see. She hugged him. His eyes were wide in shock. Was it real or he was dreaming? There they were. He told her his long-covered secret and all she did was hug him tightly. Her grip was strong but yet so gentle. Maybe there was a chance. He felt all his body being soothed at her touch. He wanted this embrace to last. He then heard her soft voice speak once more. Now I understand why they treated you like this. I just wish I could be here sooner. I wish, she said between her sobs, her face buried at his back. Now she knew why every adult in the village despised him. She hated herself for not approaching him sooner. He turned around and hugged her tightly and she buried her face in his chest, sobbing lightly. He was taken completely off guard at her reaction. You don't hate me? He asked, his voice gentle and not above a whisper, but she heard him all right. No. How could I ever hate you? I can't hate you, she said softly as she was still hugging him, her head still lying on his chest. Hinata-chan, why? He asked, his voice full of curiosity, but his eyes, as she noticed when she looked up, were full of a mixture of happiness and sadness. He stared down at this lavender pools of light. The moonlight made her face look so beautiful. Now that he thought about it, everything about her was beautiful. From her slim, well-curved body to her adorable lavender eyes. He could stare in them forever. She looked inside these blue orbs that were so clearly his. So full of emotion, so full of everything she ever wanted. One thing was missing though at the moment, and now was the chance to see if it existed for her. She needed to know, she had to tell him. It was now or never, and she couldn't stand the idea of the last. Why? He whispered again, his eyes never leaving hers. Because, she looked away to the left. Her expression full of nervousness, because. She wanted to take it out, wanted to burst it all out of her. But the fear of rejection still roamed inside her. What if he didn't return the feelings? What if he rejected her and stopped being her friend? She couldn't stand the idea, but yet, she couldn't live knowing she had a chance, but wasted it. It was so goddamn annoying. He nearly knew what she was about to say. She was now looking at him in the eye. Hinata-chan, he began to mumble himself, his eyes never leaving hers. Finally, it all came bursting out. It's not in vain. I love you, they both said in unison. Both pairs of eyes went wide. True, they did expect something like that coming, but not this. He said it. The weight was lifted, yet she responded in the same way. So there wasn't just a chance. It was there the whole time. She couldn't believe it. She was the mystery girl? She was the one he spoke about before? She was his angel? The happiness roaming inside her kept her from even flinching. They kept staring into each other's eyes for what seemed an eternity when Naruto did something he should have done a long time ago. He slowly leaned forward, his face inches away from hers. He closed his eyes and so did she. In a matter of another second, their lips met in a tender kiss. She surprised him once more. Her lips were so soft, so tender, as if all her kindness and beauty resided in this small place. Her heart was pounding like crazy. He pulled her even closer to deepen the kiss, to feel more of her warmth. After a second, they were both tightly warped into each other's arms, her hands around his neck and his around her waist. They broke the kiss after what seemed of a minute or an eternity of only touching each other's lips. Their eyes met again and now both of them could see clearly, an emotion printed all over their face, love. I love you, Hinata-chan, he said, pulling her even closer and leaning again for another claim. She didn't resist, not even the slightest. Her dreams were all coming true in one night. I love you too, Naruto-kun, she said in a soft whisper before their lips met once more. This time, he didn't hesitate. He licked her lips asking for entrance, and she gladly let him in, taste all of her, while she did the same. Their tongues massaging each other, wanting to explore each other's mouth fully. After what seemed like an eternity, they separated, the need for oxygen overwhelming. They both panted lightly but smiled at each other. And so the night went on, they, kissing under the stars and the full moon. Holding each other, not wanting to let go. They've been far away, for far too long and now, in the end, they held each other. One thought raced in their mind, please, never let me go, she thought, I'm not leaving you anymore, was his response as if he could see her thoughts in her eyes. They both wished in whispers what they just thought under the full moon so only each other's ears could catch it, and as if in response, a pair of stars fell from the sky when their lips met even once more this night. He now knew that he wasn't alone, not now, not ever. She had been there for him, but he was so blind to see through the illusion called Sakura. He was angry at himself for not noticing her before, not seeing what truly was there for him. He didn't even have to struggle like this for his dream of acknowledgement, for it was right there, in this wonderful pools of lavender. They met each other many times this night, both of them wanting to catch up for all these years of waste. After an hour or so of kissing, they were both leaning on a tree a few meters away from the Hokage monument, their eyes fixed on the sky full of stars and the full moon. A star suddenly fell from the sky. Nay, Hinata-chan, he said softly as he looked down at the girl that hugged him tightly, her head resting on his shoulder. Hi Naruto-kun? She asked, her voice not above a whisper but yet so tender. A star fell. Make a wish, he said, smiling at her who now was looking up at him. She smiled. I don't have to, she said. His eyes now emitted curiosity. Why? He asked gently. She smiled again. Because all I could wish for has already come true, she said softly and leaned towards him for another kiss. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.